Chapter 44. He Yen had always thought that she was pretty good before she went to the Xianchang dojo. After entering the Xianchang dojo, He Yen suspected that she had taken another step forward on her path every day. Those who entered the Xianchang dojo were all children of noble families. Not only were they rich and powerful, but their families were also rich. Nouveau riches or families who relied on nobility to survive could not compare to them. He Yuanliang would not have been able to get He Yen in through the back door if he did not maintain a personal relationship with the teacher. On one hand, He Yen was very happy that she could enter the Xianchang dojo. On the other hand, she was filled with pain every day she spent in the Xianchang dojo. The reason was none other than the fact that compared to the children here, her results were a little too horrible to look at. The He family taught her to behave like a man outside, but she did not learn much about the inner workings. When she first arrived at the Xianchang dojo, she did not know anything and often made a fool of herself. Even the teacher could do nothing about it. If it was the liberal arts, she could read it a few more times, memorize it a few more times, and listen attentively during lectures. She could barely get into the middle class. However, when it came to the martial sciences, she failed miserably. He Yen had snuck to the back of the mountain to help the monks carry water to practice their hand strength since she was young. She thought that she could do it now. However, the first time she did the martial sciences assessment in the Xianchang dojo, she became the wonder of the Xianchang dojo. She did not pass any of the bow, saber, and stone tests. She fell off her horse when she galloped and missed when she shot arrows. Even the teacher shook his head and sighed. The youths around her pointed at her and laughed. Someone said, "He Rufei, are you a girl? Why don't you know anything? Do you usually learn embroidery at home?" He Yen stood up from the ground in a panic and patted the dust off her body. She thought to herself, "No, if this goes on, my identity will be discovered. Before my identity is discovered, Madam He will take me back and I will have to stay at home again." It was better to study hard and practice hard. Only then could she safely stay in the Xianchang dojo. Therefore, He Yen began the path of studying hard and practicing hard. No one chiseled the wall to steal the light, no one danced when they heard the rooster, and there were also some who hung the beam and stabbed the buttocks. He Yen often scolded in his heart as he practiced. He practiced riding, archery, and saber. No matter how hard she tried, she could only struggle at the edge of the tail. Thus, those geniuses who didn't need to work hard and could easily take the lead were particularly eye-catching. Xiao Ju was one of them, and he hated her the most. This young man was born like Pan Lang, and his family background was so good that he was doted on. That was not all. He entered school on time every day, and was often late. Sometimes he left early. Usually, he did not put in much effort, but he was always the first in all the arts and martial arts subjects. Even thunder could not shake him. He Yen was very confused. God had given him beauty and a noble status. Why did he have to give him wisdom? Can't he share some with me? God did not answer He Yen. She could only tearfully make up for her lack of talent. Gradually He Yen's saber, horse, and bow began to show results. Although he could not compare to those young men who grew up with their fathers and brothers at home, he did not always get last place. Sometimes he could even fight for third place from the bottom. He Yen felt satisfied. Hard work paid off. At the end of the Xianchang dojo, the martial arts subjects would divide the weapons. He Yen chose the sword among the sabers and swords. It was not for anything else, but because he felt that a sword was lighter than a saber, and it would not be so strenuous to wield. However, her swordsmanship was also a mess. The He family did not invite a martial arts teacher to teach her in the residence. He Yen did not have any foundation. Even the horse stance was crooked. The swordsmanship teacher of the Xianchang dojo did not have much hope for her. He only wanted her to look like this. Whether she could defend against the enemy was another matter. Which young master did not bring a few attendants with him when he went out? If there was really danger, the attendants could just go. He Yen felt that this was not right. Since she had chosen, she should practice the sword well. The students could only go home 2 days a month. The rest of the time, they lived in the Xianchang dojo. She sneaked out at night in the dark and ran to the courtyard of the dojo to practice her swordsmanship. The dojo was elegantly built. When the moonlight was good, the wind rustled the bamboo forest. A stretch of green meandered. There was the moon, the bamboo cypress, and the red carp in the ponds swayed their tails. It was like heaven on earth, a fairyland in a painting. The master practiced her swordsmanship here, waiting for the world to change. She would appear when there was chaos. Yen practiced quite happily if her shoddy swordsmanship was ignored. She accidentally cut off a corner of her clothes, accidentally hit her head by the scabbard, accidentally tripped, accidentally, she heard a soft laugh. In the night, this soft laugh came inexplicably. Yen got up nervously. Could it be that she saw a ghost? She saw a person sitting on the stone bench in the courtyard. She did not know when, but someone was sitting there. She was wearing a white robe and embroidered shoes. Her eyes were bright and beautiful. It was the proud child who was favored by the heavens, Xiaoju. Xiaoju lowered her head to look at her. She put her hands behind her back and wiped the stains on her clothes. She said with a calm face, "What are you doing here?" "Watching you practice your swordsmanship." The youth lazily replied, What is there to see?" She gathered her courage to answer. She never liked to talk to the youths in the Xianchang dojo. They did not like her and always bullied her. Xiaoju looked at her for a while and suddenly stood up. She was caught off guard and the youth was already in front of her. She was a girl and was not as tall as a boy. She could only reach the youth's chest. She raised her head and could see the other party's clear jawline and beautiful eyes that were as gentle and cold as autumn water. "I was just surprised." The youth lightly hooked his lips. He was born handsome and beautiful. When he smiled, the cool night in the courtyard paled in comparison. It was more moving than the moonlight. However, the words he spat out were filled with mockery. "There is actually someone who works so hard and is still a weakling." Yen. She pushed Xiaoju away, picked up her sword and ran away. She was angry. The heavens were fair. They gave this youth beauty and talent, but they did not give him a good heart. This person was too annoying. After that, Yen still sneaked into the courtyard every night to practice her swordsmanship. Her thinking was simple. Hard work could make up for one's lack of talent. Hard work was always better than not working hard. However, what made her angry was that from that day onwards, Xiaoju also followed her out every night. When she practiced her swordsmanship, he would sit on the stone bench and read and drink tea by the candlelight. She fell until her nose was bruised and her face was swollen. Several pieces of her clothes were torn. He was like the moon and the breeze. His posture was elegant as he calmly watched her make a fool of herself. She still worked hard to maintain her sprint from the last to the third from the last. He did it effortlessly and was the best at everything. The hard work was still hard, the easy work was still easy. Spring passed and autumn came. Winter came and summer came. The youth had grown into a young man. The girl had changed her face. The white clouds changed. The sea turned into mulberry fields. The only thing that did not change was the night in the Xianchang dojo and the crescent moon in the backyard. Chapter 45. The night sky was like ink in a painting, and the stars were like embellishments. The sound of the wind was poetic. A handsome man with beautiful eyebrows and a young boy who was looking at him seriously. It was a beautiful scene. Yen was silent. Xiaoju opened his mouth and said faintly, "You're Yen?" Yen was shocked and blurted out, "I'm already so famous?" In the military camp, she did not think that she was outstanding enough to attract the attention of the commander-in-chief. How did Xiaoju know about her now? Xiaoju sneered, "You're running while carrying weights, and you can't fire your crossbow." He looked down at the top of Yen's head and said casually, "And you're so short. I can't think of anyone else in the military camp." Yen was speechless. "And you're so short." For a moment, she seemed to have returned to the time when she first met Xiaoju in the Xianchang gymnasium. Xiaoju's evaluation of her was that she was stupid and short. She did not expect that Xiaoju would still give her such an evaluation after she changed her body. He was still the same as before. He was so arrogant and unreasonable. Looking at him like this, he did not have the coldness of a young man. He was just like the young boy in her impression who was so outstanding that he was almost mean. Yen naturally felt wronged. To be honest, with her height, She really couldn't be called short among women. It was just that in the military camp where there were burly men everywhere, she looked as weak as a chicken. But she could not be blamed. When she was Hien, she was a little taller than she was now. Moreover, He Rufei replaced her, so other people would not think that General Fei Hong was short. But now, she could not stuff cushions in her shoes to make herself look taller. As she was thinking, Xiao Ju suddenly took a step closer to her. The distance between them was a little too close. Hien was stunned. The shape of his eyes was extremely beautiful, clear and gentle. When he lowered his eyes to look at her, it gave her the illusion that she was looking at a lover. His skin was also very white, even more sparkling and translucent than Lady He's skin, which made his brows look even more picturesque. His fine black hair was tied up and draped over his shoulders, making him look cool. There was a faint scent of moon qilin, which made people want to touch him. Hien thought that if the fairy who came riding on the deer saw this person, she would be so embarrassed that she would turn around and leave. No wonder so many women in the capital dreamed of this noble man. They would never get tired of looking at his face for the rest of their lives. "What are you thinking about?" he asked indifferently. "I'm thinking about what I can eat to be as good-looking as you," Hien replied. His movements stiffened, and he no longer pressed closer. As if he had verified something, he shifted his gaze and said, "Boring." He actually did not scold her? Hien was surprised. She thought that Xiao Ju was going to use the military order to scold her. But on second thought, she understood. Xiao Ju had not revealed his identity yet. According to common sense, she should not know who he was. Therefore, she could only pretend that he was a stranger who accidentally bumped into her practicing ginger. "What's so boring about this?" Hien blew the hair on his forehead and said carelessly, "Everyone loves beauty." Xiao Ju paused and stared at him. That stare was as if he was looking at a dead man. Hien stared back at her without fear. He had never seen someone as reckless as her. Xiao Ju was also startled for a moment. Then she sneered and turned around to leave, leaving Hien alone in the martial arts arena. Hien realized something. Xiao Ju's temperament was colder than before, but it was also better than before. In the past, when she angered him, he could mock her without repeating himself. But now, he only glanced at her and did not want to talk to her. In the past, she did not dare to provoke Xiao Ju. But now, this noble second son of a Xiao family did not bother to argue with others like he did when he was young. Did this mean that she could easily anger Xiao Ju to death and take revenge on him for hurting her in the past? The heavens were still fair. She thought, what goes around comes around. Today, it's my turn. Very good. After Xiao Ju left, Hien pulled the crossbow for another hour. When his hands were sore, he went back to sleep. The next morning, he woke up slightly later. Xiao Mai pushed him and said, "Ahigu, wake up." Hien opened his eyes. The bodies of different people were indeed different. When she was young, no matter how late she secretly practiced her swordsmanship, she could still listen to her teacher's lectures the next day. But now, she only stayed up for one night. It was not very late, but she felt uncomfortable all over. Could it be that she really had a hard life in her previous life? Hien reflected on himself. Although he reflected on himself, he still had to do what he needed to do. Today, they carried sandbags and ran. After running, everyone consciously followed the recruits to the back of the training field to prepare for yesterday's archery. The crossbows had already been put up. During the day, it was not as cool as it was at night. The sunlight was so bright that it was dazzling. Liang Jiaodo stood beside the crossbows. The recruits went to test the bows one by one. Compared to yesterday, the recruits weren't as excited. Their technique was also much more stable. Fewer of them shot at random places. At the very least, they were shooting at the target without a mistake. Hong Shan also went to shoot. His shooting was better than yesterday. Shirtu still won Liang Jiaodo's praise. Although Xiao Mai's hand strength was small, it was not too bad. Moreover, because of her brother Shirtu's guidance, her improvement was obvious. Hien saw Wang Ba again. Wang Ba walked forward unhurriedly. Before he pulled the bow, he deliberately gave Hien a contemptuous look. Hien responded with a smile. This smile seemed to have angered him. His face immediately darkened. Without thinking, he pulled the bow and shot an arrow. With a whoosh, the arrow pierced through the air and went straight through the grass target. It was almost the same as yesterday. The grass target was brought forward and fell down. The surrounding recruits immediately applauded and cheered. Here, people always worship the strong. Wang Ba put down his bow and walked in front of He Yan. He said in an overbearing manner, "It's your turn." He deliberately raised his voice so that everyone around could hear him. "Yesterday, you couldn't pull the bow. In front of everyone, you said that you can pull the bow today. Brother He Yan, today, let us see how you pull the bow. What do you think?" For a moment, everyone's eyes were on He Yan. He Yan's name had spread throughout the entire military camp because of yesterday's incident. Everyone knew that Liang Jiaodo had a recruit who could not even pull the bow, but still dared to boast shamelessly. Now that they saw the real person, they all looked at He Yan and waited for a good show. "Ahigu." Xiao Mai timidly tugged at the corner of her clothes. He Yan smiled at her and slowly walked forward. She faced Wang Ba's malicious smile. Her expression was magnanimous, and her tone was modest. "Brother, it must be hard for you to remember my words so clearly. Since you want to see so much, I'll let you see," she said lightly. Chapter 46. Everyone stared at He Yan's movements. The young man walked to the crossbow. Compared to his thin and small body, the crossbow did not match him at all. She picked up the crossbow, took out an arrow from the quiver, and put her finger on it. Wang Ba looked at her with disdain and said, "Put in more effort. Don't be like yesterday, putting on airs for a long time only to say that you can't pull it open." He Yan did not seem to hear his words. On the other hand, Hong Shan was a little nervous and secretly worried for He Yan. The recruits in the army admired the strong. He Yan was not a girl, so they would not have any pity for him. They would only think that he was weak. Weak people were not worthy of sympathy. If he was a braggart, people would look down on him even more. He Yan had said yesterday that if he could not do it today, not only would the instructors secretly despise him, but other people in the barracks would also be ashamed to be associated with him and would not be friendly to him in the future. He gave up yesterday without even pulling it open. Could it be that he could pull it open today? The young man's gaze was fixed on the target. From this direction, his hands were very steady. His sunken eyes were like a hunting beast, quietly waiting for the moment to jump. The bow was pulled open. Bit by bit, it was not easy, but slowly, without any tremors, it was pulled open slowly. It was different from yesterday. It could be seen that the bow was slowly being pulled open. "It's moving." Xiao Mai excitedly tugged at Shirtu's clothes. "Big brother," Ahigu pulled the bow open. He knew that He Yan could do what he said. He did not know how many times he had said it. The crowd whispered. Wang Ba did not expect this to happen. He was stunned at first, but then he immediately felt angry as if he had been slapped in the face. He gritted his teeth and stood still, wanting to see what kind of exquisite archery He Yan could show. Liang Jiaodo, who originally did not have much hope, was also attracted by He Yan's movements. This kid was good. Yesterday, he had said that he could draw the bow today, and today he really did. How did he do it in a day? Could it be that he had been pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger yesterday, saying that he didn't even know how to do it, just so that he could be in the limelight now? While everyone was talking, the bow was already half drawn. He Yan stopped and did not continue to pull the string. This was already her limit. She loosened her grip and the arrow flew steadily towards the target. Everyone stared at the tail feather of the arrow. The arrow flew in the direction of the target, but before it reached the target, it fell powerlessly to the ground. There was a sigh of regret from the crowd, as if the arrow should have undoubtedly hit the center of the target. He Yan withdrew his hand. Xiao Mai was the first to jump out. He ran to He Yan's side and said with bright eyes, "Ahigu, you really pulled the bow. Amazing." Hong Shan also came over and patted He Yan on the shoulder. "You're really something." Although Shirtu didn't say anything, he also smiled, showing that he was very happy. Liang Jiaodo also gave He Yan a look of affirmation. When the surrounding recruits saw this, they gradually started to talk about it. "He really pulled the string. Looks like he wasn't bragging. It's just luck. He just happened to pull the string." Luck is also a kind of strength. Plus, he did what he said. That's not bad. Wang Ba was a little confused. He came to see He Yan make a fool of himself, but in the end, it seemed like He Yan was the one who was in the limelight. He looked at the target that fell in the middle. He Yan didn't hit the target at all. He didn't even touch the edge of the target. If it was someone else, it would be a very bad result. Why was it that when it came to him, it was just short of applauding and celebrating? Did he make a mistake? Wang Ba was unconvinced. Isn't it just pulling the bow? Ask around in the barracks, how many people pulled the bow? I'm afraid everyone except you. What's so great about that? Me. He Yan pointed at himself and laughed. But I'm the exception. I couldn't pull the bow a day ago, but I pulled it a day later. That's called great. Her eyebrows were curved and she laughed happily. When Wang Ba saw this smile, he was so angry that his heart turned upside down. He said, I'm not convinced. What are you not convinced about? He Yan asked. Wang Ba was a person who bullied the weak and feared the strong. He admired the strong and despised the weak. People like He Yan who was weak were born to dislike him. In addition, he had a grudge with He Yan in the past. If he didn't find trouble for He Yan, he wouldn't be happy. How can someone like you be a recruit and train with us? Wang Ba turned to Liang Jiaodo. Liang Jiaodo, I'm not convinced. Liang Jiaodo looked at them calmly and didn't have any intention of interrupting. He was an instructor, not their superior. After this batch of recruits finished training here, they might be stationed in the Liangzhou Guards, or they might follow Xiaoju to other places. In the end, they wouldn't be his people. His responsibility was to teach them basic skills and pick out some good seedlings. In the end, it was the general's job to organize the troops. Was he going to lose Wang Ba, who was very talented in the bow and arrow, for He Yan, who didn't look particularly outstanding? You don't have to make things difficult for Liang Jiaodo. He Yan glanced at Liang Ping and knew what he was thinking. The instructor here was very cunning. He would definitely weigh the pros and cons at this time. She looked at Wang Ba. Tell me what you want. Wang Ba laughed sinisterly. You'll be the head soldier. No. He Yan rejected without thinking. Why should I? Why should I? Wang Ba said. Because you couldn't draw the bow yesterday and shot so badly today. Your friend actually cheered for you. Don't tell me that when you go to the battlefield in the future, Dewey's soldiers will be like you, using the bow and arrow so badly that they can't even kill a single enemy. Do they still need people to cheer for them? What kind of army is this? Wow, He Yan couldn't help but applaud Wang Ba in her heart. She even said that the mountain bandits were not literate. Now, it seemed that she was smart. Her words were so dignified. When she first entered the military camp, she was not so good at talking. She was indeed the head of the mountain. If she did not know how to bluff, how could she be the boss? Fortunately, she had been in the army camp for so many years and had seen such a scene before. Not bad, you're right. The youth brushed away a lock of hair that had fallen on her forehead. She paused for a moment before saying, however, you also saw that I couldn't draw the bow yesterday, but I can draw it today. You hit the target yesterday and you still hit it today. Everyone looked at her. They didn't understand what she meant. I'm getting stronger day by day, but you're just getting stronger day by day. In that case, I'll be able to hit that grass target 10 days later. What about you? You'll still only be able to hit this grass target. 10 days later, I will definitely beat you, she said word by word. Chapter 47. 10 days from now, I will definitely defeat you. The young man's voice was powerful and resonant. The sunlight shone on his eyes, making them look like sparkling gems. For a moment, Wang Ba actually doubted himself. The next moment, he was shocked by his momentary doubt. He secretly cursed himself for being scared by a brat who was still wet behind the ears. He had lived for more than half his life. How could he lose to a weak brat? Ignorant brat. His mouth was too big. He thought too highly of himself. He coldly snorted and said, He Yan, do you know what you are saying right now? Do you want me to repeat it? The young man smiled and said, Since your ears are bad, I will repeat it again. 10 days from now, I will definitely defeat you. Wang Ba clenched his fists. He must be crazy. Hong Shan muttered. Wang Ba's archery skills were obvious to everyone. He Yan might have improved a little compared to yesterday, but to be able to hit the target in one shot was not something that could be achieved in 10 days. It was understandable for a young man to say harsh words in a fit of anger. However, if he went too far, what would he do if he was embarrassed in the future? If you can't defeat me 10 days from now, what will you do? Wang Ba gritted his teeth and said. He decided not to argue with this young man. Yan was too thick-skinned. If you mocked him, he would ignore it. If I can't defeat you, I will be the team leader, He Yan answered readily. But if you can't defeat me, I will be the team leader, Wang Ba said loudly. I didn't say that. He Yan shook his head. Even if I want you to be the team leader, Liang Jiaodo will not agree. She looked at Liang Ping meaningfully. Liang Ping, who was calculating in his heart, was speechless. How strange. How did this brat know what he was thinking? With Wang Ba's talent, the head instructor will kill him if he becomes the team leader. Then tell me, Wang Ba said impatiently. He Yan's mind suddenly flashed back to the time when he was young in the Xianchang dojo, where the youngsters loved to play games together. Xiao Ju, as the number 1 in the Xianchang dojo, had been pestered and challenged by many people when he was young. What did he say at that time? She remembered that the youth was sitting behind the rockery in the academy, taking a nap. When he was woken up by someone, he sat up in annoyance and lazily said to his classmate who came to challenge him, "All right, if I lose, you can do whatever you want with me." "If you lose," he smirked, "you'll have to call me father." As He Yan thought about it, he felt that the current situation was somewhat similar to what had happened back then. However, she could not let Wang Ba call her father. "How about this? I heard that you're the head of the mountain and their boss. If I beat you, it means that my ability is above yours. You'll have to call me boss in the future. What do you think?" This request was really unheard of. Everyone looked at He Yan, who was not even as tall as Wang Ba's chest and whose arms were as thin as firewood. Then, they looked at Wang Ba, who was tall and strong and whose fists were bigger than He Yan's face. They fell silent. "Your ambition is really not small." Wang Ba stared at He Yan and said with a fake smile. "To be honest, before I joined the army, I also thought about becoming a bandit." He Yan's face was filled with emotion. That year, when she left the He family, she carried her luggage at night and hesitated several times at the city gate. She was hesitant between two paths. One path was to directly go down south and become a bandit, and the other path was to go west and join the Fuyue army. The good thing about being a bandit was that she was free and there was no one to control her. The bad thing was that if the harvest was not good and no one passed by, she would not know her next meal and would starve. Also, the government would come out to suppress the bandits. She would often hide here and there, which was not very dignified. Although joining the army was a bit more difficult, it was still food provided by the government, so it would be dignified. However, neither of these two paths accepted women, so she had to disguise herself. Fortunately, she was good at pretending to be a young master since she was young, so she was able to rise step by step. Now that she thought about it, she really sighed. Seeing that He Yan still looked like he was reminiscing about the past, Wang Ba was even more angry. This kid now looked like he was only 15 or 16 years old. Why was he acting like he was an old man? Reminiscing about the past? Did he have a past to reminisce about? He tried hard to control his anger and not let himself chop off the kid's head. He squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "If you want to be the boss, then let's see if you have the ability." "Okay." He Yan cupped his hands toward the surrounding recruits. "I'll have to trouble everyone to be the witnesses of the bet. Since it's like this, we'll see the results here in 10 days. I wish myself good luck." She snapped her fingers and looked at ease. It was unknown whether she was confident or had a unique skill in her hands. She looked as if she was sure that she would win. Wang Ba left angrily. Xiao Mai and Hong Shan rushed up and surrounded He Yan. The people who were watching the show gradually dispersed. Occasionally, there were a few people who looked at He Yan with complicated expressions of admiration and sympathy. They probably all thought that He Yan would definitely be the head soldier. Liang Ping glanced at He Yan, shook his head, and left with his hands behind his back. As he walked, he sighed. Young people were so impulsive and didn't consider the consequences of their actions. However, why did he feel a little excited as he thought about it? In less than half a day, the entire Liang province guard knew about the bet between He Yan and Wang Ba. Some people in the barracks secretly started gambling. They didn't have much money and were desperately poor, so they used the biscuits in the kitchen as wagers. Those who bet that Wang Ba would lose had a payout of 1 to 10. Those who bet that He Yan would lose had a payout of 2 to 1. In the past few days, the number of people eating biscuits had decreased significantly. They were training all day long. It was not easy to find entertainment. In the room, Cheng Lisu walked in. He had changed into a brand new yellow robe. A red koi fish was embroidered on the corner of the robe. It was very lifelike, pitiful and cute. As soon as he walked in, he shouted at the youth sitting at the table, "Uncle, do you know that the entire barracks is talking about the crossbow bet in 10 days? Xiao Ju's gaze didn't leave the page of his book. He said, "I know." The entire barracks knew about it. A weak kid who wanted to be the boss of a mountain bandit, and an expert archer who wanted to be the head soldier. They were really a pair of oddballs. Now there's even a gambling house. I'm going to bet. Are you going? Cheng Lisu squeezed in front of Xiao Ju and asked him excitedly. Cheng Lisu? Xiao Ju put down the book in his hand and looked at him calmly. You're gambling in the barracks? His tone was calm, but Cheng Lisu shuddered. He quickly raised his hands. No, it's not me. It's someone else's. It's not like I'm gambling. At most, I'll bet a few biscuits to pass the time and have some fun. Uncle, I'm still a child. It's normal to hit a peach and shoot a willow. Xiao Ju snorted. You're losing your ambition. I don't have ambition. How can I lose my ambition? Cheng Lisu replied confidently. Xiao Ju did not know how to respond. Uncle, if you're not going, I'll go bet myself. I don't want to eat biscuits. I'll bet with my jerky. It won't be silver. He said happily and was about to leave. Who are you betting on? He had just reached the door when he heard Xiao Ju's voice. Xiao Ju had never been interested in these things. Cheng Lisu was surprised for a moment, but still answered obediently. Of course it's Wang Ba. That brother He Yan, isn't he just like me? Xiao Ju frowned. I advise you to change your bet. Don't look down on an idiot who works hard. The young man lowered his eyes, as if he was recalling another figure. His limpid eyes rippled as he continued, the last idiot I've seen is now a third-grade marshal general. Chapter 48. Since the first day He Yan made the bet with Wang Ba, the people in the barracks also started to bet in private. Some people who were not present to see He Yan draw the bow even came to see how He Yan looked like before going to bed at night. He Yan remembered that the last time he attracted so much attention was when he won a battle as General Fei Hong and was rewarded by the imperial court. Although the situation was different now, he was still famous. Those people are too much. Xiao Mai came back from outside and said unhappily, I heard that the number of people who bet that He Gu will win can be counted on one hand. They are so sure that He Gu will not win. This is the normal choice of a normal person. Hong Shan facepalmed. Thanks to He Yan's good fortune, these days, the recruits could do nothing but train and endure hardships. Once this matter came out, there was a lot of fun. Everywhere was brimming with cheers and laughter, as if they had come to the city square of the capital. Big Brother and I also went to join in the fun to boost He Ji's morale. We bet that He Gu will win. Xiao Mai looked at He Yan and said fawningly, He Gu, aren't we very loyal? Before He Yan could say anything, Hong Shan asked first, how many biscuits did you bet? Big Brother and I each bet 1 biscuit. 1 biscuit? Hong Shan deliberately dragged his voice. Then how many biscuits did you bet on Wang Ba? 10. Xiao Mai answered without thinking. When he came back to his senses and met He Yan's gaze, he blushed and stammered, No, we wanted to win more biscuits and share them with everyone. If He Gu loses, we can't lose both the biscuits and the money. It's good to fill our stomachs. His voice became softer and softer. In the end, he did not dare to speak and looked at He Yan pitifully. He Yan was very surprised. Where did you get 10 biscuits? Even if they saved 1 biscuit every day, they could not save so much. On credit. He Yan was very surprised that he could even buy on credit. He thought that this was actually a big gamble and not just a small one. She said earnestly to Xiao Mai, "Xiao Mai, you'd better quickly withdraw from Wang Ba's bet. 10 biscuits. Are you planning to starve for 10 days? Can you survive that?" Hong Shan had a headache. He be reasonable. Now is not the time to be angry. He Yan. What can I say to make you believe that I'm not acting out of spite? He refused to believe it. The other three almost had this sentence written on their faces. He Yan had no choice but to stand up and say, "Then I'll go out and practice first." He left the room. Sigh. Mai sighed with melancholy. Sigh. Hong Shan sighed gloomily. Stone silently looked at the two of them. He didn't say anything and sighed as well. The atmosphere in the room was gloomy. The bet with Wang Ba was only the beginning of He Yan's fame. These days, He Yan's name could be heard everywhere. Did you hear? That new recruit under Liang Jiaodo called He Yan is crazy. I know. The one who bet with Wang Ba 10 days later. Wasn't he crazy when he made the bet? He's even crazier now. Instead of practicing his crossbow during the day, he's actually throwing stone dumbbells. He's not even shooting anymore? Then he might indeed be crazy. He Yan was throwing stone dumbbells in the open space. When everyone practiced their crossbow during the day, many people surrounded and watched her. She simply stopped practicing. She borrowed a big stone dumbbells from the instructor and threw them for fun. She had to increase her strength. In order to maximize the power of the crossbow, she needed to have enough strength to fully draw the bow. What she lacked the most now was strength. Stone weights were the best tool for training strength. Previously, when she was in the military camp, she had a strong man who was originally a street performer. He had learned stone weights from a young age and was able to play with them until he was very good at it. The stone dumbbells could fly up and down her body. She could do anything she wanted, such as catching lotus leaves, fanning the beam, chopping somersaults, covering the top of her head with snowflakes, taking off her robe, and so on. This strong man was also good at archery. Not only was his aim good, but other people couldn't fully draw the bow like him. He could fully utilize the power of the crossbow. He Yan used to throw with him to train her arm strength. The two of them threw and dodged each other. She trained her arm strength, wrist strength, hand strength, and waist strength. Now that there was no one to throw with her, she just wanted to train her arm strength and fully draw the bow. Practicing stone dumbbells increased her strength much faster than drawing the bow. He Yan threw stone dumbbells during the day. At night, she sneaked to the practice field after everyone was asleep. Fortunately, there were 1 or 2 bows left in the practice field every day for her to practice in secret. What was even more fortunate was that ever since she saw Xiaoju last time, she didn't see Xiaoju again at night. Although she wasn't afraid of meeting Xiaoju, she always felt embarrassed when a Xiaoju saw her secretly practicing at night. It made her feel like she was back in her youth. She saw her clumsy self working hard every night to make it to the third from the bottom. She couldn't bear to look back. This was probably the humiliation of being looked down upon by God's favored children. Originally, she had already gotten rid of this feeling of humiliation. Who would have thought that the heavens would come again, and by a freak combination of factors, she would feel this kind of humiliation again? What did she do to deserve God's favor? She practiced every day, and the people she couldn't understand the most were the people around her. Hong Shan said hesitantly. No matter how good you are at drawing the bow, if your aim isn't good, there's no way you can beat Wang Ba. Yeah, I've been watching Wang Ba for you every day. He can always hit the center of the target. He almost never misses, Xiao Mai said. Wang Ba is a good archer, He Yan said. He should be good at using the bow to hurt people. It seems like he's even more skilled than Shirtu. Shirtu nodded. He agreed. Then he go, why don't you practice archery every day? Xiao Mai was even more puzzled. You should at least practice archery a few times. What if the arrow flies into the forest? No need, He Yan said. Xiao Mai stared at him with wide eyes. Could it be that He Yan had some secret magic weapon? He Yan smiled. She didn't have any secret magic weapon. She was just practicing archery during other people's sleep. She would draw the bow and shoot every day under the moonlight. The bow was getting more and more full and it was very effective. As for her accuracy, it didn't deteriorate. It was really a blessing in disguise. I'm not very talented. She thought seriously for a while and said seriously, but I'm very lucky. You have to believe that even if I don't practice archery, as long as I can draw the bow fully, the arrow will fly to the target as if it has eyes. Everyone looked at He Yen, who was smiling, and the same thought flashed through their minds. He Yen was really crazy. Chapter 49. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. The entire Liangzhou guards were looking forward to this lively bet. Most of them bet that Wang Ba would win, while a small number of them stood on He Yan's side. Occasionally, when they passed by, they would hear people who supported He Yen arguing with the other side. What's wrong with He Yen? He knows he can't do it, but he still does it. He's a real man. He Yen, who accidentally overheard them. However, no matter what they said, the bets were the best way to tell the people's hearts. There were only 3 biscuits that were bet on He Yan's victory. Xiao Mai, Shi Tu, and Hong Shan each had 1 biscuit. Other than that, what made He Yen surprised was that there was an unknown person who actually bet 10 pieces of beef jerky on He Yen. Who's so generous? Xiao Mai thought hard. He must be very rich to bet so much on a He Ge. Not only is he rich, but he also has a good eye. He Yen thought that there was finally a smart person in the military camp. Hong Shan glanced at He Yen. Unfortunately, his brain is damaged. Brother Shan, you can't say that. This person must admire a He Ge a lot, so he secretly supported a He Ge. If I had so much meat jerky, I would also bet on a He Ge. Hey, small bets are fun, but big bets are bad for your health. Don't be so serious. He Yen took a sip of water from his water bottle and stood up. We're going to the martial arts arena later. Let's get up and stretch our muscles. Shi Tu asked her, can you really do it? His eyes were full of doubt. I told you, I'm always lucky. He Yen smiled. When they arrived at the martial arts arena, they found that Liang Jiaodo was already surrounded by many people. When they saw He Yen, someone shouted, He Yen is here. Instantly, a large group of people rushed over. Where is he? Where is he? He didn't run away. He's really here. Quick, have you prepared the biscuits? He Yen, this kind of treatment like being the moon surrounded by a myriad of stars really made people feel a little unaccustomed. Liang Jiaodo looked on coldly. Gambling was strictly forbidden in the military camp, but because they were using biscuits and under such circumstances, the head instructor had no intention of stopping them. Liang Jiaodo didn't say anything. Moreover, he was also hot-blooded and wanted to see what the outcome would be. After all, humans were more or less addicted to gambling. He Yen walked over and saw a young man dressed in yellow licorice standing beside Liang Ping. This young man had red lips and white teeth. He was in high spirits and looked very familiar. He Yen felt that he had seen him somewhere before, so he looked at him. The young man saw her looking over and revealed a big smile. He walked over and said enthusiastically, So you are He Yen? Was he here to see her too? However, looking at the young man's clothes, he didn't look like a new recruit in the military camp, nor did he look like an instructor. He looked no different from the son of a noble family in the capital. I've heard about you a long time ago. I admire you. I want to become sworn brothers with you. From now on, we will be brothers. How about that? He said. He Yen was confused. This person wanted to become sworn brothers with her. She didn't even know his name or surname. At this time, Liang Jiaodo walked up and smiled at the young man in yellow. Young Master Cheng, the commander-in-chief wants you to stay away from the crossbow. Xiaoju? He Yen suddenly remembered where she had seen this young man before. She and Yunxing were in the military camp and secretly taught young Master Zhao a lesson. This caused young Master Zhao to vent his anger on his beloved horse and wanted to kill it on the street. However, he was stopped by Xiaoju. At that time, the person who was with Xiaoju was this delicate young master. He actually followed Xiaoju to the Liangzhou garrison? Uncle is too suspicious. It doesn't matter. The crossbow won't hit me. The young man muttered a few words and obediently retreated a little. Uncle? He Yen was even more surprised. This young man was Xiaoju's nephew? However, Xiaoju's family only had 2 young masters and no other daughters. What kind of complicated relationship was this? Before He Yan could think clearly, he heard a familiar voice. "You're here?" It was Wang Ba. He was also fully prepared today. He had already taken off his red robe and was only wearing a red robe. He was bare-chested and there was a long red belt tied around his forehead. He looked as if he was going to fight in the arena. His voice was also very loud. He heard that the brothers in the tent had given him all the food last night so that he could use all his energy today. He walked to the crossbow and stood next to He Yan. He looked at He Yan provocatively. 10 days have passed. Now is the time for you to fulfill your promise. I remember. You didn't have to say it so loudly. He Yan picked at his ear. You first. Wang Ba snorted and moved closer to He Yan. He said in a low voice, "Is it too late for you to beg for mercy now?" "That's exactly what I wanted to say to you." He Yan replied neither quickly nor slowly. "I think you're looking for death." Wang Ba sneered. He strode forward and said, "He Yan doesn't dare to go first. Then I'll go first." Sounds of discussion rose around them. He Yan shrugged and stood to the side. Hong Shan asked him in a low voice, are you nervous?" "I'm not nervous." He Yan was somewhat helpless. He patted Hong Shan's nervous face. "So you don't have to be nervous even more. I'm afraid that he'll perform too well. In fact, Wang Ba performed very well every day. There was no such thing as too well." He stepped forward, put the crossbow and held the arrow with his fingers. Because of the bet with He Yan, Wang Ba practiced more diligently every day. He Yan could feel that his strength had improved compared to 10 days ago, and his archery was also more stable than before. The arrow was aimed at the grass target. At this time, the sun was covered by clouds, and a temporary coolness shone down. Wang Ba took a deep breath and suddenly released his fingers. Everyone looked over. The arrow steadily hit the bull's eye, and the target fell down. It was very stable. It was the same result as Wang Ba's daily archery practice these days. It was not easy to maintain such archery skills. Liang Ping's eyes flashed with a trace of satisfaction. No matter what the result was today, Wang Ba was an excellent seedling. Such a person would be valued even if he was under the command of other instructors. Wang Ba clapped his hands, put the crossbow back, and walked to He Yan's side. He showed a proud smile and asked, "How is it?" "It's your turn now." He Yan smiled but did not say anything. He turned and walked forward. I'm coming." Cheng Li Su excitedly craned his neck and whispered to himself, "Brother He Yan, I threw 10 pieces of jerky into your body. Although it's not much, it's a token of my sincerity. Don't disappoint me." He Yan did not know that he was still burdened by Cheng Li Su's 10 pieces of jerky. From the moment she walked to the crossbow, the surrounding discussion stopped. Everyone's eyes fell on her. Was this brat spouting such arrogant words? Or did he have a unique skill? But there were too few things in the world that could be called miracles. Except for a small number of people who hoped for a miracle, most people were just here to watch a joke. He Yan picked up the bow. Chapter 50. The bow and arrow were still the same bow and arrow from 10 days ago, and the person shooting the arrow was still the same person from 10 days ago. However, the atmosphere was different. The smile on the young man's face disappeared. He placed his finger on the arrow and looked straight at the center of the grass target. The clouds just now dispersed, and the scorching sun shone on his face. It was unusually hot in summer, and a drop of sweat slowly rolled down his forehead. The drop of sweat was crystal clear and was about to roll into his eyes. It made people's hearts tighten for no reason, and they wanted to reach out and wipe the drop of sweat away. However, the young man did not move at all, as if he was a piece of shirt. He did not feel anything and did not notice the drop of sweat. His gaze did not waver at all. The bow was slowly pulled open, a part of it, half of it, until it was fully pulled. Everyone's hearts followed suit. Just as they were about to suspect that the bow was going to break in the next moment, the young man stopped what he was doing. He was caught off guard and let go of the arrow in his hand. The arrow was like a meteor that cut through the night sky. Only a gust of wind could be felt, and it aggressively rushed towards the target. With a bang sound, the target fell down. And this time, The target was brought further away, making it impossible for people to see the arrow on it clearly. She shot the target down just like Wang Ba. Someone exclaimed. 11 days ago, He Yan stood here and could not even pull the bow open. 10 days ago, He Yan could only pull the bow open a small part. Now, she was here, and the bow was fully drawn, and the target fell to the ground. Her strength had improved greatly in these 10 days. But He Yan was not a child prodigy. How could things like strength grow with the wind? Ai Gu is amazing. Xiao Mai shouted, laughing and jumping. Ai Gu won. What won? A recruit who bet on Wang Ba's victory felt sorry for his biscuit and said unconvinced. He only hit the target, but it doesn't mean that he hit the center of the target. If he didn't hit the target, he still won. When he said this, everyone remembered that they weren't watching He Yan's performance of drawing the bow as far as he could draw the bow. It was probably because she was too thin and weak in the past that she couldn't even pull him apart. Now that she was surprised by the growth of He Yan's arm strength, she even forgot to check her aim. I'll go take a look. Someone volunteered to run to the target. Wang Ba looked at He Yan. The young man was standing under the scorching sun, his lips full of smiles. It was this same smile again. He had been like this ever since he met him. He didn't seem to be worried at all. He was always so confident and disgusting. Wang Ba looked at his own hand. Why was he also wavering? He was an orphan without parents. When he was young, he was taken away by a wolf. When someone rescued him from the wolf's den, he was still lying on the mother wolf's body and drinking its milk. He had been a bandit for many years, and countless birds and beasts had died under his bow. He was able to hit the target because he had been touching a bow since he was 7 years old. It had been more than 20 years since then. This little kid was only 15 or 16 years old. Even if he had been playing with a bow since he was born, it had only been 10 years. How could he be compared to him? Moreover, 10 days ago, He Yan didn't seem to be pretending that he couldn't pull the bow. Therefore, it was impossible for him to be an expert with a bow since he was young. Thinking of this, Wang Ba calmed himself down and calmed his slightly restless heart. He Yan definitely couldn't win against him. There was no doubt about it. At this time, the person who took the initiative to look for the target had already run to the target. He lowered his head to look at the target and didn't answer for a long time. Then he suddenly squatted down, picked up the target and ran back. The target was made of straw, so it was easy to pick it up. He quickly ran to the front and threw the target with the arrow on the ground. He shouted, "Everyone, take a look for yourselves." Wang Ba's heart suddenly thumped. Everyone looked at the straw man and saw that the center of the straw man was pierced through by an arrow. It steadily and accurately hit the bullseye. It was exactly the same as Wang Ba. Wang Ba's forehead was dripping with sweat. The shocked discussions of the surrounding people seemed to gradually fade away. He saw Liang Ping staring at He Yan in surprise. The young master in brocade clothes beside Liang Ping was also full of joy. He Yan stood beside his friend. He didn't look very surprised. He just smiled faintly, as if he had already expected this. "You," He Yan smiled and said, "you let me win. You didn't win against me." Wang Ba stared at him. "You and I have the same result. How can you say you won against me? At most it will be a draw." Both of them had shot down the grass targets, and both of them had hit the grass targets right in the middle. It was indeed very difficult to determine a winner. But for Wang Ba, such a result was expected. But He Yan was different. At first, he looked like a good-for-nothing. Now that he could do this, it was impressive. After He Yan heard Wang Ba's words, he didn't become flustered and exasperated. He didn't even argue with Wang Ba. Instead, he nodded and said, "I think so too." Wang Ba heaved a sigh of relief. Admitting a draw was also very good. At least he didn't lose. Those recruits also wiped the sweat from their foreheads. Who would have thought that He Yan would hit the target in the end? If it wasn't a draw, they would have lost their biscuits in vain. A draw was good. A draw was just right. No one lost or won. They could just treat it as watching a new exciting show. The next moment, everyone's rejoicing was broken by He Yan's words. She said, "But I made a bet with you that day. Today, I will definitely win against you." Now that the winner hasn't been determined, Naturally, we will compete until I win. Tian. Wang Ba gritted his teeth. What did this mean? Was he so sure that he would win? Just now, he was just lucky. What was this brat saying? What did he want to do? Liang Ping also stared at He Yen in surprise. In the crossbow competition, you can casually propose a competition. I will accompany you to the end until I win. How about it? She asked with a smile. You think too highly of yourself. Wang Ba coldly stared at her. I don't think highly of myself. I just believe in my luck. She carelessly blew the strands of hair on her forehead. You have to know that luck favors those who are prepared. And she was always prepared. This is what you said. In the crossbow competition we can casually compete? Wang Ba slowly asked. Absolutely. Okay. The knife-scarred man nodded. Suddenly, he lifted the huge crossbow from the stage and carried it on his back. He took 2 steps forward and said with his back facing her, "What's the point of shooting a dead grass target? On the battlefield, the enemy won't stand still for you to shoot. If you really want to shoot an arrow, shoot living things. Birds and beasts are just perfect for practicing the sound." He actually wanted to use living things as prey. Everyone was stunned. Shooting living things was much more difficult than shooting a target. In ancient times, there was a saying that one could shoot a willow leaf from 100 paces away. However, that saying was not as agile as a living thing. You can't fall into his trap. Don't agree to it. Hong Shan anxiously signaled He Yen with his eyes. He Yen looked at Wang Ba. A trace of appreciation flashed through his eyes. She nodded and said in a straightforward voice. Chapter 51. He said yes. Liang Ping, who had been silent all this time, looked at He Yen in a different light. With his previous experience, he knew that this young man was not bluffing. Since he agreed, it should not be bad. Can he shoot living things? If you want to shoot wild animals, you have to go into the forest, Wang Ba said. The forest was on Mount Baiyue. He looked at Liang Ping. Liang Ping stopped thinking and shook his head. No. Wang Ba and He Yen were both new recruits. They had never been to Mount Baiyue and were not familiar with the roads. It would take some time for the new recruits to enter the mountain. They could not do it now. He said, "Let's use the birds as targets." The new recruits were shocked again. If wild animals were harder to shoot than grass targets, then birds were definitely harder to shoot than wild animals. Humans were on the ground while birds were in the sky. The natural distance was different. Moreover, shooting arrows from the ground to the sky required better eyesight and arm strength. Wang Ba laughed loudly. He Yen also smiled. No problem. Both of them agreed casually, but the new recruits, who had just calmed down, became excited again. It seemed that Wang Ba often went up the mountain to shoot birds and wolves. What about He Yen? Xiao Mai quietly pulled Shirtu's clothes. Big brother, do you think a He-Gu can win? I don't know, Shirtu answered. Xiao Mai looked at her big brother in surprise. Shirtu did not deny it immediately. Did this mean that He Yen could really hit the target? You guys go get the bow, Liang Ping said. He called another new recruit for something. The new recruit listened to Liang Jiaodo's instructions and turned to find a gong on the shelf in the martial arts field. He took the gong and ran into the forest not far away. A moment later, a dong sound was heard as he fiercely hit the copper gong inside. A burst of flapping sound was heard, startling countless wild birds. White Moon Mountain was densely covered with forests and wild birds. He Yen had seen the white-bellied blue swallow and green pearl sparrow last time. The wild birds quickly flew into the sky. In a split second, Wang Ba immediately knocked his bow and shot an arrow. His movements were skillful, and he had a kind of relaxed determination to kill the birds in the forest. The arrow flew into the sky, and a bird that was spreading its wings in the flock seemed to have been hit by something and fell down heavily. In the martial arts practice field, someone exclaimed, "He hit him! I hit him!" The recruit picked up the arrow on the ground. There was a red squeak on the arrow. This was Wang Ba's prey. Wang Ba looked at He Yen proudly. He Yen smiled and carelessly pulled the bow to aim at the sky. Her movements were faster than Wang Ba's, so fast that it made people wonder if she was aiming at her prey. However, the arrow had already flown out. The sun was so bright that it blurred people's vision. For a moment, they were unable to determine the direction of the arrow. Shi Tu looked at the sky without blinking. After a while, he said, "It hit him." "Really?" Hong Shan looked suspicious. "Why can't I see it clearly?" In a corner of the martial arts practice field, another person's voice sounded. "I picked up He Yan's arrow." He took the arrow and ran to Liang Ping. There was a willow string hanging on the arrow. Liang Ping and Wang Ba looked at He Yan at the same time. The former was pleasantly surprised to find that the person in front of her was a treasure, while the latter was full of disbelief. How did he do it? Wang Ba held the bow in his hand tightly and said, "Again." He shouted at the recruit who rang the gong, "Continue." The recruit rang the gong a few times, and a large flock of birds immediately flew out from the forest. Wang Ba knocked several arrows in his hand at the same time, and several arrows were shot at the same time. Several arrows flew into the sky at the same time. It was hard to tell if they had hit their target or not. After a while, someone in the martial arts practice field shouted excitedly, "It hit him. The arrow is with me." To be able to shoot several arrows at the same time without fail, this person was 1 in 100, no, 1 in 1,000. Then what about He Yan? Everyone looked at He Yan again. He Yan smiled slightly and copied Wang Ba's actions, knocking several arrows on the bow together. The bow was fully drawn, and the young man had a relaxed smile on his face, as if he was a young man who went to Sisui shoreline for a walk and casually played with his archery skills. She pulled the bow. The arrows also rushed into the flock of birds, and the birds dodged in a panic. Someone in the martial arts practice field shouted, "It hit him. I picked up the arrow." He took the arrow to the head instructor, and none of the arrows missed their target. Wang Ba gritted his teeth, turned around, and carried the quiver on his back. "I don't believe that you'll be lucky every time." He knocked the bow and kept shooting, and actually wanted to shoot all the arrows in the quiver. There were 20 arrows in each quiver, and the colors of the arrows were different, making it easier for the recruits to distinguish them during practice. Wang Ba picked up a red arrow, and He Yan picked up a green arrow. She followed Wang Ba's example and shot arrows non-stop. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They could only hear the sound of the gong in the forest and the startled sparrows flying in the sky. "It's so beautiful. So interesting." Cheng Lisu's eyes lit up as she watched. She grabbed Liang Ping's arm and praised, "This is so much more interesting than the hunting ground in the capital. Liang Jiaodo, why are the soldiers under your command so interesting? How did you find such a talent?" Liang Ping smiled apologetically, but he was also very confused. He didn't know either. Wang Ba was already a pleasant surprise, and now He Yan was here as well. Liang Ping wondered if he was dreaming. The 20 arrows were used up in an instant. The recruits on the training ground were also very enthusiastic. They all collected the arrows that had fallen and brought them to Liang Jiaodo. 20 red arrows hit their targets, and 20 green arrows hit their targets. None of them missed their targets. Unexpectedly, there were 2 godly archers among the recruits of the Liang Province Guard who could shoot rocks and eat feathers without missing a single target. Liang Ping thought that he would probably be promoted soon. Even if he didn't, his monthly salary would probably increase. "I didn't think that he gu would be so good." Xiao Mai was already stunned as she muttered to herself. "I didn't expect it either." Hong Shan still hadn't recovered. "If I had known, I would have bet on he gu winning." That's right, the bet wasn't over yet. Hong Shan's words seemed to remind everyone. A recruit suddenly shouted, This counts as a draw. Didn't He Yan and Wang Ba end up with the same result? Then how does this round count?" "That's right, how does this count?" Wang Ba lowered his head. No one knew what he was thinking. After a moment, he raised his head, his expression uncertain. "You didn't win." "That's right." He Yan didn't deny it. She even sincerely praised him. "Your archery is too good." "I was careless." "Then let's count it as a draw." "You still didn't win against me today," Wang Ba said. At this point he was also a bit panicked. Actually, He Yan was able to keep up with him in terms of flying. This meant that he and He Yan were on par with each other in terms of archery. He couldn't find any other way to win against He Yan. 10 days ago, I said that I would definitely win against you in 10 days. Now that victory hasn't been decided, how can we call it a draw? Yen fanned herself with her hand. Since you can't think of a way to compete, then I'll suggest one. How about it? Chapter 52. She wants to compete in the crossbow? Liang Jiaodo looked at her inquisitively. Cheng Lisu whispered, Liang Jiaodo, is there anything else to compete in the crossbow? Liang Jiaodo shook his head. This? I don't know. There were many competitions in the crossbow, but they were mostly the same. Yen had already shot Flying Bird just now, so it shouldn't be difficult for him to compete in the other competitions. But what she meant was that she was definitely going to win against Wang Ba. But was there anything that Wang Ba couldn't do that she could do alone? Wang Ba was stunned at first, but then he scoffed disapprovingly. Go ahead and say it. At most, he would say that it was a tie, he thought. Yen smiled and walked to Cheng Lisu's side. Suddenly, he reached out and pulled the hairband that bound Cheng Lisu's long hair. Cheng Lisu was stunned. By the time he reacted, his long hair was already loose. He said, What are you doing? I'm sorry, brother. Yen smiled. Since you want to become sworn brothers with me, I don't think you'll be stingy with a hairband. Let me borrow yours. But I can. Cheng Lisu carelessly ran his hands through his hair and muttered, This is too sudden. Besides, why don't you use your own hairband? Yen obviously had one too. I see that brother's hairband is much more exquisite than mine. Maybe I got lucky and borrowed some of your luck. Yen lied without batting an eyelid. Who didn't like to hear nice words? Cheng Lisu immediately beamed with joy. Well said, well said. Just use it. Everyone didn't understand why he took Cheng Lisu's hairband. They watched as Yen slowly wrapped the hairband around his hands and covered his eyes. Everyone gradually understood what he was doing. The yellow hairband covered her eyes tightly. She reached behind her head and gently tied a knot, then said, It's done. Yen didn't use his or the others' hairbands because it was a hot day. They had run and practiced archery, so they were already covered in sweat. The people in the barracks weren't particular about it, so their hairbands were more or less stained. However, this nephew of Xiaoju was different. Looking at the brand new clothes he was wearing, which still carried a fragrance, and his hair tie was also as neat as new. He was exactly the same as his uncle who was obsessed with cleanliness. Presumably, he would be much cleaner to use. Perhaps it was cleaner than Yen's own clothes. Now that he had tied the hairband, he thought that as expected, it actually carried a faint scent of rosin. Yen sighed in his heart. They were indeed uncle and nephew. Yen, what are you trying to do? Wang Ba asked with a frown. He had a guess in his heart, but he didn't dare to admit it. Let's shoot arrows blindfolded, she said. The martial arts practice field gradually quieted down. The summer wind blew by, blowing the long end of her hair ribbon, making the scarlet-clothed youth look a bit more elegant. With a smile on her lips, she held the longbow in her hand and faced Wang Ba's direction. This round, I will definitely win against you. She said these 4 words calmly and decisively, as if she had already predicted the outcome. Wang Ba's face turned green and white. Before he could speak, someone else spoke first. His tone was full of doubt. Blindfolded archery? What are you shooting? Grass targets? Yen shook her head and slightly raised her head. She was blindfolded, so she shouldn't be able to see the sky. However, when she raised her head, it was as if she could see the traces of mountain sparrows flying in the sky. She said, Just like before, I will hunt mountain sparrows. The crowd was in an uproar. She was actually so conceited. But was she really conceited? Yen turned to face Wang Ba again. She smiled and asked, Can I? Can I? These 2 words were just like when Liang Jiaodo asked her that question. She answered readily, Can I? Now, the 2 words, can I, were already at the tip of his tongue, but Wang Ba couldn't say it. Whether he was a bandit or went up the mountain to hunt and kill people, it was all for a purpose. Blindfolded archery, he wasn't blind. It was meaningless to do such a thing. He wasn't the son of a rich family, so it was a novelty. If he was very confident in his bow and arrow skills, then the competition method Yen proposed was the one he was least confident in. He couldn't do it at all. Wang Ba looked at Yen. Yen didn't urge him to quickly give him the result. However, the surrounding recruits were also sizing him up with various expressions, making it difficult for Wang Ba to back down. Could it be that he was going to be humiliated by a yellow-haired brat here today in front of everyone? If word got out, he would be called a bandit leader who didn't even dare to answer a child's question. Fine. He gritted his teeth and said. However, he felt lucky. Maybe Yen was also tricking him. This brat had always been cunning and strange. Maybe he couldn't do it himself. However, he deliberately acted as if he was extremely confident. He wanted to trick him into giving up and admitting defeat before him. TSK, he wouldn't fall for it. For this round, you go first, Wang Ba said to him. The youth smiled again. Her posture was light and agile. She nodded and spat out 2 words, fine. Beside the stage in the martial arts field, there was a pavilion. The pavilion was next to the Liangzhou guard station. It was high up and could see the entire martial arts field. There were 2 people standing in front of the pavilion, looking at the youth who was surrounded by the recruits from afar. One of them was wearing red clothes with a black belt around his waist. It was Shin Han. The youth beside him was as cold as ice and had an indifferent expression. It was Xiao Ju. I didn't expect that there would be 2 good seedlings in this batch of recruits. Shin Han sighed and said that Wang Ba doesn't need to be mentioned. Although he was born a bandit and is unruly and difficult to tame, his bow and arrow skills are indeed exquisite and he has extraordinary strength. However, the most surprising one is the youth called Yen. He's only 15 or 16 years old, but he's already so outstanding. His temperament is gentle and lovable. After a few more years of growth, he will definitely become one of the best in this batch of recruits. He thought of the conversation he had with Liang Ping. At that time, Liang Ping thought highly of Yen, but Shin Han didn't take it to heart. It was because he thought Yen's aptitude was too ordinary and not worth paying attention to. He didn't expect that he would almost miss a good seedling. He saw that Xiao Ju didn't respond, so he carefully probed, "What do you think, Commander-in-Chief? Gentle temperament?" The youth slowly repeated. After a moment, he said, "I'm afraid you've misjudged. The one who is unruly is not Wang Ba, it's Yen." Yen? Shin Han was a little doubtful. He had seen the youth a few times and he always had a smile on his face. Wang Ba had provoked him several times, but he didn't get angry. To be honest, a child at this age was hot-blooded and would start a fight if there was a disagreement. Yen was already very restrained and gentle. Commander-in-Chief actually said that Yen was unruly and difficult to tame? For the first time, Shin Han doubted his superior's judgment. Then, Shin Han changed the topic. "Commander-in-Chief, do you think Yen can win this round?" The youth curled his lips and said lightly, "Yes." Chapter 53. On the martial arts field, Yen had already slowly drawn her bow. Blindfolded, you can't see anything. If you can't see the prey, you can only listen to the prey. And there is nothing better than a blind person who can hear everything in the world more clearly. When she was blind, she was also dispirited. A blind person walking in this world had so many inconveniences. If she couldn't even take care of herself, how could she be an outstanding person? She had always been hardworking. She made up for her mediocre aptitude with diligence. But disaster came and instantly took back all her efforts. Even her mediocre aptitude turned into a delusion and turned into ashes. She remembered that when she was unwilling to give up, someone said to her, "If you really want to be strong, so what if you are blind? Even if you are blind, you can be the most different one among the blind." This was not a very good consolation, but it was magically remembered by her. When she was groping and practicing to be able to do things without using her eyes, she often thought to herself, "Be the most different one among the blind." She didn't know if she was the most different one, but she should be considered different from ordinary blind people. She could take care of herself and even take care of others. She could practice swordsmanship behind her back and throw dice. She could also be naughty and secretly hide a child's slingshot to secretly shoot birds. As a blind person compared to other blind people, her life was not too bad. Since she could do things that she could do when she was blind, there was no need to mention it now. She just temporarily returned to that period of time in the past. The sound of the gong in the forest startled countless birds. The figures of the birds were reflected in the sky. The young man smiled and shot an arrow. The arrow followed the trail of the birds and flew straight up into the clouds. A bird chirped as it was shot by the arrow and fell rapidly. The green arrow reflected the yellow cloth in front of the young man's eyes. It was bright and beautiful. Yen reached out and untied the headband covering his eyes. She didn't even look at the arrow on the ground, as if she had already expected to shoot the prey. She handed the cloth to Wang Ba and smiled, "It's your turn." The surroundings were silent. Wang Ba didn't reach out to take the headband she handed over. Yen did not move. After a long while, Wang Ba lowered his head dejectedly. He did not look at Yen and only said in a low voice, "No, I don't know how to." "You're good. I'm not as good as you." His words were half angry and half sincere. He was angry that he had lost to Yen and lost all his face. He was convinced that Yen's skill of shooting arrows while blindfolded was indeed something he did not know. Even if he started to learn in the future, he might not necessarily be better than Yen. Everyone had to admit their own shortcomings. The recruits finally regained their senses, but they didn't crowd around and cheer. At first, a voice wailed, my biscuit lost. So miserable." Another voice said, "I'm even worse off. I had 10 on credit and they're all gone." Soon after, cries of anguish rose and fell. None of the Liang province guards seemed to have bet on Yen winning the biscuit. Even though he had the support of Xiao Mai and the other 2 biscuits, it was still futile. However, at this moment, a joyful voice rang out, "I won. I bet 10 pieces of jerky. I've always said that I, Cheng Lisu, have a good eye for people." Yen was about to leave when he heard this and was stunned. He turned around and looked at Cheng Lisu. He did not expect that the person who bet 10 pieces of jerky was Cheng Lisu. However, after thinking about it, if it wasn't Cheng Lisu, who else would be so generous? Xiaoju? It would be strange if Xiaoju participated in this kind of gambling. Cheng Lisu ran to Yen's side and looked at Yen with sparkling eyes. "That, brother Yen, thanks to you, I finally won this time. You don't know, I can't do anything in the capital. I'm not good at literature, I'm not good at martial arts. Even when I go to the casino, I only lose money. I've never won once. Today is the first time I've won. Brother Yen, I must become sworn brothers with you. Today is the day we become sworn brothers. I want to treat you to a drink." Liang Ping clenched his fist and pressed it against his lips. "Drinking is not allowed in the camp. Then I'll treat you to some tea." Cheng Lisu held Yen's hand and looked at Yen as if he was looking at a long-lost relative. There was a genuine closeness. "That won't be necessary." Yen pulled his hand out and stuffed the headband into Cheng Lisu's hand. "I almost forgot about this. Thank you for the headband, young Master Cheng. There's no need for thanks between us." Cheng Lisu giggled. He suddenly thought of something and turned to Wang Ba. "Hey, didn't you forget something?" "What?" Yen did not understand. "Did you forget about your bet?" Cheng Lisu said anxiously. "You made a bet with him. If you lost, you would be the head soldier. If he lost, he would have to call you boss. Now that he lost, he has to fulfill his end of the bet." Wang Ba's body stiffened. The people around them started to jeer and laugh. Liang Ping turned his back to them. What happened after this was not something he should be involved in. Xiao Mai and Hong Shan leaned against each other to watch the commotion. Yen raised his eyebrows and looked at Wang Ba. Wang Ba walked step by step to Yen. He was much taller than Yen. Yen was really too small in front of him. His face was flushed red. Even the old scar on his face was so red that it looked like it was going to bleed. Yen noticed Cheng Lisu's tightly clenched fists and sighed silently in his heart. Perhaps as the head of the family, he had to place more importance on his reputation? Asking him to call him boss would be even more embarrassing than killing him. Yen was about to say forget it when Wang Ba said in a low voice, "Boss." Yen. She looked up at Wang Ba. Wang Ba thought that she was going to make things difficult for him and said angrily, "I've already called you that. It's your own business if you didn't hear it. I won't call you that again." "I heard it." Yen laughed. I was just surprised that you actually called me that. A man of his word is worth 9 tripods. I'm not someone who goes back on his word. Wang Ba snorted coldly. You're lucky this time. In the future, don't provoke me. After saying this, he seemed to feel very embarrassed and didn't want to stay there any longer. He turned around and left in a hurry. He Yen thought for a moment and thought to himself, this Wang Ba is indeed a little hot-blooded. He can be considered to know when to yield and when to stand tall. Brother He Yen, look at you. You're really amazing. Cheng Lisu came up to him again. To celebrate, let's go. I'll treat you to tea. He Yen didn't have time to refuse before he was pulled away by this happy young man. Young Master Cheng took He Yen away. In the pavilion, Shen Han asked, Commander-in-Chief, should we go and chase him back? No need, Xiao Ju said. After watching the competition, he seemed to be tired of it and turned to leave. Shen Han quickly followed. He thought of something and looked at Xiao Ju again. He silently calculated in his heart. When the commander-in-chief said that He Yen was the arrogant and unruly one, he didn't believe it at first. Now, it seemed that it was true. Although He Yen was thin and small, he was able to make a bandit leader call him boss. Wasn't he difficult to deal with? If this continued, he would be able to become sworn brothers with the commander-in-chief. However, Shen Han glanced at Xiao Ju's cold face. The commander-in-chief didn't like this guy. Chapter 54. He Yen wasn't able to become sworn brothers with Xiao Ju, but Xiao Ju's nephew pestered him to become sworn brothers with her. Cheng Lisu pulled He Yen to his room in the garrison. His room was different from the bunks the recruits shared. It was a separate room. Although it wasn't luxuriously decorated, it was much better than the recruits' bunks. There was even incense in the room. The incense was placed in an exquisite fairy ornament. Seeing He Yen staring at it, Cheng Lisu explained, this is something I brought from the capital. Uncle doesn't allow me to light it here, so I'll light it secretly. Don't tell him. She looked like a child who was doing bad things behind her parents' backs. He Yen thought to himself, don't mention Xiao Ju, even if it was her, she wouldn't light it. It was already summer and the weather was so hot. What kind of incense would it be? Seeing that he didn't speak, Cheng Lisu misunderstood his meaning again. She probed, do you like this a lot? If you like it, I'll give it to you. She stuffed the incense burner into He Yan's hands. It's okay, we're good friends. He Yan put it back. Thank you, but I don't have a place to put it. Cheng Lisu thought for a while and nodded regretfully. I'll talk to Uncle later and ask him to give you another room. It'll be the same as mine. He Yan, it would be a miracle if Xiao Ju agreed. If Cheng Lisu really did it, he would even call Cheng Lisu big brother. Oh right, you still don't know who my uncle is, right? My uncle is the current commander-in-chief of the Right Corps, General Fengyun's second young master Xiao, your superior. Cheng Lisu finished in one breath and looked at He Yan's expression. Seeing that He Yan's expression was normal, she said, why aren't you surprised at all? Should she be surprised? He Yan said, I see that young master's bearing is outstanding, unlike ordinary people. I think young master's uncle is the same. Indeed, like uncle, like nephew. These words pleased Cheng Lisu. He revealed a bashful smile, scratched his head, and said embarrassedly, that's not it. I'm far inferior to uncle. My uncle lives next door, but he's out now. Otherwise, I'll take you to see him. He Yan thought, that's not necessary. Come. I've poured the tea. Cheng Lisu was so busy that she stuffed a cup of tea into He Yan's hand. After drinking this cup of tea, we'll be sworn brothers. He Yan looked at the tea in his hand, hesitated for a moment, and then put the tea back on the table. Cheng Lisu was stunned. What's wrong? Young Master Cheng, I don't think we should address each other as brothers. It's a mistake, He Yan said. She and Xiao Ju were of the same generation, but Cheng Lisu called Xiao Ju uncle. If she and Cheng Lisu became sworn brothers, wouldn't she have to call Xiao Ju uncle in the future? How could she let Xiao Ju take advantage of her? Dream on. How are we of the same generation? Cheng Lisu was puzzled. I'm 15 this year. I heard from Liang Jiaodo that you're 16 this year. There's not much difference between us. He Yan said, you call Xiao? Uncle Commander Xiao. He's not that old, right? Xiao Ju was only 1 year older than her in her previous life, and she had just turned 20. She asked, he's your biological uncle? Yes, we're relatives. Cheng Lisu explained very seriously. It turned out that Cheng Lisu's mother, Madame Cheng, was Xiao Ju's cousin. However, the age gap between Madame Cheng and Xiao Ju was too big. When Xiao Ju was born, Madame Cheng was already married, and the two siblings rarely interacted. However, when Cheng Lisu grew up, she liked to stick to her uncle, who was about the same age as her. He Yen recalled that when they were at the Xianchang restaurant, there was a chubby young master who often came to look for Xiao Ju. However, he couldn't remember if he called Xiao Ju uncle. My uncle is excellent in everything. He's 1 in a million in both civil and military matters. I feel proud to be with him, and no one dares to call me a useless young master anymore. Cheng Lisu didn't feel ashamed when she talked about her nickname. Now that I'm on good terms with you, and you're as excellent as my uncle, I'm really amazing. He Yen was speechless. He didn't know where this amazing came from. Speaking of He Yen, Cheng Lisu thought of something and asked, oh right, since you're so excellent, brother He, what does your family do? He Yen didn't even drink the tea and he actually called him brother He. He Yen didn't know whether to answer his question or correct him first. She said, my family is just an ordinary family. Cheng Lisu saw that she didn't want to say anything else, and it had a deeper meaning. Cheng Lisu said solemnly, I understand. Even experts like you don't want to reveal your whereabouts. He Yen thought, is there something wrong with this child's brain? If you're so capable, why did you come to the Liangzhou Guard? Cheng Lisu asked. With your abilities, why did you join the army? He Yen repeated what he had said to his uncle to his nephew. A real man should make a name for himself. He should be rewarded, build a house, marry a wife, and have children. This life shouldn't be in vain. His nephew wasn't as impulsive as his uncle. The young man with rosy lips and white teeth looked at him for a while, then nodded and praised, your way of thinking is very good. It's very practical. However, brother He, isn't it a little too slow for you to join the army and make a name for yourself? There haven't been any battles in the past few years, and they say that heroes emerge in troubled times. Now that we're at peace and prosperity, you won't be able to display your martial arts skills. It'll be a waste. He Yen was speechless. This child was quite thoughtful. Why don't I point you in the right direction? Cheng Lisu moved closer to her and whispered, you know about the Southern Prefecture soldiers under my uncle, right? He Yen nodded. I've heard of them. The Southern Prefecture soldiers were established by old General Xiao. They were invincible and undefeated. Among the Southern Prefecture soldiers, there's a cavalry unit called the 9 Flags Battalion. He Yen also knew about the 9 Flags Battalion. After Xiao Ju took over the Southern Prefecture soldiers, he cultivated a group of trusted aides for himself. They were mostly used for surprise attacks and their methods were strange. Other than other matters, my uncle came to the Liangzhou Guard this time to pick some new recruits and bring them back to join the 9 Flags Battalion. He Yen was shocked. Didn't the 9 Flags Battalion stop recruiting? That's what they say to the outside world. What's the rarest thing in the world? Talent. Everyone in the 9 Flags Battalion is a talent. Last time, a big brother in the battalion was injured and lost an arm, so he can't fight anymore. Now, he's an official in the imperial court. Therefore, if you want to make a name for yourself, get promoted, and get rich, you have to find the right place first. With your skills, and you're one of us, you should go to the 9 Flags Battalion, the young man said slowly. He Yen gradually stopped smiling. After a while, she frowned and said coldly, have you told anyone what you said just now? Her gaze was so cold that Cheng Lisu jumped in fright. She stammered, no. Then remember, you can't say this to anyone else. Cheng Lisu nodded subconsciously. He Yen was satisfied. Suddenly, her eyes curved and the corners of her lips curled up. But what you said just now was very right. Huh? Cheng Lisu was confused. The fastest way to get promoted was secondary. She fought for merits on the battlefield too slowly. Even if she really got promoted, she might not be able to come into contact with the He family. However, it was different when she was with Xiao Ju. General Feng Yun and General Fei Hong were sworn enemies. Just based on this point, she could make a lot of news. Moreover, it was much easier to find out about imperial court matters when she was with Xiao Ju. In her previous life, she never thought about having any entanglements with Xiao Ju. Now, she had to rack her brains to become Xiao Ju's confidant. This was really inconceivable, but it was also a coincidence. He Yen finished the tea in her teacup in one gulp. She stood up and said, "I want to join the Nine Flags Battalion." The end of the first volume. Chapter 55. The summer days in the Liang Province Guard Institute were long and unbearable. Every day was arduous training, dry and tedious. However, the days passed like this. After the minor summer came the great summer, and not long after the great summer, it would be the beginning of autumn. The training under the scorching sun allowed the Liang Province Guard recruits to quickly develop excellent endurance and determination. Every month, apart from crossbows and early morning running with weights, they also had to practice the whip, blade, footwork, formation, spear, blade, and equestrian archery. There was less training in equestrian archery because there were limited horses in the Liang Province Guard. Ahigu, your biscuit? Xiao Mai passed the biscuit to He Yen. The biscuit had been baked over a charcoal fire, crispy and salty. With one bite, even the crumbs were steaming hot. He Yen chewed 2 bites of the biscuit and gulped down a large mouthful of water. He felt his empty abdomen instantly warm up in indescribable comfort. Hong Shan stared at He Yen and asked curiously, "He, I think something's wrong. You said you eat the same as us every day, and sometimes you even get special treatment. Why are you still so skinny, so small?" He swallowed back the word short. He Yen, could he blame her? Her sworn brother, that useless young master Cheng Lisu, came over every few days and secretly gave He Yen some food. Sometimes it was a handful of pine nuts, sometimes it was a few pieces of jerky. Once, he even gave He Yen a bowl of soup, saying he stole it from his uncle. Every time he gave it to him, Cheng Lisu would be especially nervous. Quick, eat here. Don't let my uncle see." It was like secretly visiting a prisoner. He Yen sometimes really didn't want to eat. Why bother? But when he thought about it, he felt like he couldn't live without food. Moreover, the food Cheng Lisu gave him was really quite delicious. Even this kind of special treatment didn't make He Yen look any sturdier. On the other hand, he was busy training every day and sweated non-stop. After a few months, he lost a lot of weight and looked even more pitiful. However, a few days ago, this pitiful little fellow had displayed a stunning display of skill in the Liang Province Guard's crossbows, making the Mountain Bandit, Scarface, call him boss, and making countless new recruits lose their biscuits. The memory of that was still fresh in their minds. He Yen could be considered a famous person now. After that, no one came to challenge He Yen for the time being, and He Yen was happy and relaxed. She was still thinking about how to get Xiao Ju's attention so that she could enter the Nine Flags Battalion. Today, he was practicing the long spear. Most of the spears on the martial arts practice field were made of thick wood. The shaft of the spear was tough and durable, and the tip of the spear was short and sharp. The head instructor swung his spear on the stage, and the recruits below followed suit. After practicing for a while, they also had some results. He Yen was not good with spears. She was used to using swords. Now that she had become Lady He, it was even more inconvenient for her to use a spear. She always felt that her hands and feet were tied. After Liang Jiaodo finished practicing a set of spear techniques, he let the recruits practice on their own. He walked down the stage to inspect He Yen. When he walked to He Yan's side, he couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. After all, He Yan's skill with the bow last time was really hard to forget. Of course, this new recruit was highly valued. However, these days, Liang Jiaodo also noticed that He Yan's whip, blade, footwork, spear, and knife skills were not bad, but they were far from the level of stunning. The only thing that surprised him was her equestrian archery. However, because there were no competitions these days, he could only see a little of it. She trained seriously every day, including crossbow and running with weights. She never slacked off. However, Liang Jiaodo still had a feeling that this young man seemed to be holding back. What he showed every day was only a part of it. He walked to Instructor Du Maodu's position. Instructor Du was also patrolling. A few instructors surrounded him and pointed at a recruit. They were talking about something. Liang Ping walked over and heard them talking. As expected of a family that runs a martial arts school. Look at that spear technique, it's amazing. I say, he is actually more skilled than you. Old do I have never seen this set of spear techniques before. This kid's age is not old. I estimate that he is only 17 or 18. He must have been practicing since he was young. Liang Ping asked, who are you talking about? That, Instructor Du's recruit. The one standing at the far left of the front row. He is big and tall. Do you see him? Liang Ping looked in the direction he was pointing. Sure enough, he saw a young man in martial arts clothes practicing his spear. This young man had thick eyebrows and big eyes. His facial features were regular. Between his eyebrows, there was an air of perseverance. There was also a hint of arrogance. His steps were steady, and the spear in his hands was dazzling. Moreover, it was not just for show. Liang Ping could feel that every step he took was filled with killing intent. Liang Ping could not help but praise. He is indeed good. Du Maodu also felt proud. I have tested him a few times before. He is really skilled. His name is Jiang Jiao. His father is the owner of a martial arts school in Beijing. Then why did he come to join the army? Liang Ping was surprised. Although the young master of a martial arts school could not be considered rich, in an ordinary family, he could still live without worrying about food and drink. He has great ambitions. A man has great ambitions. Do you understand? Du Maodu said, I admire men like this. Someone interrupted. I wonder if this Jiang Jiao or old Liang's subordinate, He Yan, who is better? As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings became quiet. Du Maodu looked thoughtfully at Liang Ping. Liang Ping subconsciously replied, He Yan is quite talented in archery, but I think his spear skills are average. He is not Jiang Jiao's opponent. What a joke, He Yan was so small and thin, while this Jiang Jiao was very tall and robust. Comparing spear arts and archery arts was different. In archery, the prey was grass men, birds, and beasts. In spear skills, two people were competing. If one was not careful, one would be injured and bleed. Jiang Jiao's family ran a martial arts school. He had been practicing martial arts since he was young. He Yan was not Jiang Jiao's opponent. If he was beaten to death by Jiang Jiao, where would he find such a godly archer? Old Liang, you can't say that. After hearing his words, Du Maodu did not give up. He turned and hooked his arm around Liang Ping's shoulder. He Yan, your subordinate, was always behind at the beginning. In the end, he was able to run easily. In the beginning, he couldn't even draw his bow. In the end, he could shoot blindfolded. If you say he can't do it now, he might be able to do it 10 days later. As an instructor, you can't be too protective of the recruits. After all, they will have to go to the battlefield in the future. The surrounding people echoed, yes, yes, old Du is right. Old Liang, you can't be so protective. Right my ass. Liang Ping thought angrily in his heart. A group of onlookers who didn't care about the situation. They were up to no good. Liang Jiao, I also want to compete with He Yan. Liang Ping turned around. The young man named Jiang Jiao had put down his spear and walked behind him. He probably heard the discussion of the instructors and suddenly said this. Liang Ping didn't answer. He was thinking about how to refuse. Can I? Jiang Jiao asked again, as if he didn't know his dilemma. Chapter 56. Can I? I don't think so, Liang Ping thought. Just as he was about to say it, someone said, Hey, why are you asking Liang Jiao? Just ask He Yan. That guy knows what he's doing. If he's willing, then let's compete. If he's not, then forget it. Isn't this a simple matter? That makes sense. Du Mao nodded and said to Jiang Jiao, You can ask He Yan directly. But, he paused and said, You can compete, but don't overdo it. Don't hurt anyone. Liang Ping had no choice but to watch Jiang Jiao walk towards He Yan. When Jiang Jiao arrived in front of Liang Jiao's new recruits, he immediately saw He Yan practicing with her spear. It wasn't because she was too eye-catching, but because she was too thin and small in this group of brawny men. Jiang Jiao didn't immediately go forward. Instead, he quietly watched He Yan for a while. He Yan didn't practice any complicated spear techniques. She simply withdrew her spear and thrust it out. Even though it was the most basic spear technique, she practiced it seriously and didn't slack off at all. After watching for a while, someone noticed him and asked, "Brother, why are you standing here and watching us?" "I'm looking for someone," Jiang Jiao said and strode in front of He Yan. He Yan was thrusting her spear forward when someone suddenly grabbed the tip of her spear. The person who had stabbed her took 2 steps back. She looked up and asked curiously, "Why are you grabbing my spear?" Jiang Jiao was forced to take 2 steps back from the stab, and a trace of surprise appeared in his heart. This He Yan looked like he was dancing with his spear, but when he actually held the spearhead, he realized how powerful this spear was. If it weren't for the fact that his family ran a martial arts club, he would have been stabbed to the ground by an ordinary person. Thinking of this, he put away some of his contempt and looked seriously at He Yan. "I heard that Brother He is unparalleled. I would like to exchange pointers with Brother He in the spear. What do you think?" He Yan blinked and understood. Was this another person here to challenge him? Hong Shan, who was standing behind He Yan, slapped his head. "Oh no, people are afraid of fame just like pigs are afraid of being fat. When he defeated Wang Ba last time, I knew something was wrong. Look, this is the second person's. There will be more in the future?" Xiao Mai's asked. "There are many. There will always be a 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Hong Shan shook his head. "People like to be competitive. What's the point of fighting's win? What's the point?" He Yan felt that it was very interesting. She had always thought that if she wanted to enter the 9 Flags Battalion, she would have to let Xiao Ju know that she was an extraordinary hero who stood out from the crowd. However, Xiao Ju didn't come to the training field every day to watch the recruits train. She didn't have a place to show off either. Unless someone like Wang Ba kept challenging her and building her reputation, it would naturally spread to Xiao Ju's ears. But for some reason, ever since she competed with Wang Ba in the crossbow competition, no one else came to challenge her. He Yan guessed that the loss of the biscuit made the recruits lose a lot of energy, so they didn't want to see her for the time being. She couldn't take the initiative to find people and ask them to compete with her. Now, there was another person. If this wasn't giving her a pillow when she was sleepy, then what was? It came at the right time. Okay. He Yan placed the spear beside her. "How do you want to compete?" Her answer was so straightforward that even Jiang Jiao was stunned for a moment. He hesitated for a moment and said, "You just need to spar with the 2 of us. Don't overdo it." He Yan said, "Go get your spear. Let's compete on the training field." Jiang Jiao hesitated and asked, "Don't you need to wait for 10 days? He Yan was stunned and found it funny. "Don't you need 10 days every time?" Did they think that she needed to perform a ritual in 10 days? A few days ago, she didn't have enough arm strength. Now, besides training every day, she didn't forget to practice stone weights. Although she wasn't as good as a strongman, she was good enough for a normal crossbow. The few instructors who had rushed over after hearing the news huddled together. Someone touched Liang Ping's arm and said, "Old Liang, I've said it before. Maybe your recruit doesn't even care about this competition. You're the only one who's worried about nothing." Liang Ping didn't know what to say. He thought that He Yan wouldn't agree. He thought that if He Yan rejected, Jiang Jiao wouldn't say anything. He didn't expect that He Yan would agree. Did this guy never know how to write the word reject? Or was he so confident that he wouldn't reject anyone who came to challenge him? "I'm looking forward to it." Du Mao took off the leather water bag at his waist and drank a mouthful of water. He stared at He Yan, who was walking towards the training field. "How about we make a bet?" Liang Ping refused. The recruit who lost the biscuit last time was starved for a whole month. It was scary just looking at him. Now that the recruit didn't want to gamble, why did the instructors want to bet? "He's a coward. If he doesn't want to come, I'll do it." Another instructor said, "I'll bet on the yellow wine that will be distributed at the end of the month. I bet that Jiang Jiao will win." When Cheng Lisu heard that He Yan was going to compete with Jiang Jiao, his first reaction was to look for Xiao Ju in the room next door. He rushed over excitedly. Xiao Ju was talking to his personal bodyguard. He frowned when he saw Cheng Lisu. Cheng Lisu, why are you running around like this? Uncle, I'm here to tell you to watch a good show. Xiao Ju signaled for the bodyguard to leave. After the bodyguard left, he asked, "What's the matter?" "My sworn brother, Brother He, is going to compete with someone in a spear competition today." Cheng Lisu grabbed Xiao Ju's sleeve. "It's going to start now. It's at the training field. Let's go watch, okay?" He Yan? Xiao Ju raised his eyebrows. He remembered He Yan. In just a few short months, this person's name had spread throughout the Liang province guards. First he ran. Then, he went from not being able to draw his bow to not missing his target. Finally, he became Cheng Lisu's sworn brother. Cheng Lisu would secretly bring food to He Yan every few days. He would turn a blind eye to it and treat it as a child's game. However, this person was determined. Although his talent was average, he would still run to the training field every night after the new recruits went to bed. He would only return to his room to rest at the third watch of the night. "Yes, you know my brother too." Cheng Lisu pulled Xiao Ju's sleeve and dragged him outside. "I heard that this kid took the initiative to look for my brother today. My brother will definitely teach him what real spear skills are." Xiao Ju glanced at him. "Sleeve." Cheng Lisu immediately let go of his sleeve and hugged his arm instead. He begged, "Uncle, just go with me and watch. My brother is really amazing. He's not any worse than the strong men in your 9 Flags battalion." Xiao Ju sneered. He didn't seem to care about what Cheng Lisu said. However, he didn't stop and followed him out. Cheng Lisu sighed in relief. He thought to himself, "Brother, this is all I can help you with." Chapter 57. The high platform on the training field was usually the place where the head instructor spoke. The open square field was a good place for sparring. The recruits gathered around the high platform and looked at the 2 people on the stage. Jiang Jiao had already received his spear. He was tall and sturdy, and looked very valiant. Probably because he had been practicing martial arts since he was young, he looked different from the other recruits. His appearance was also very good. If one were to be with this person, they would feel very at ease. He Yan was standing opposite him. Compared to him, He Yan looked more like a teenager who had not yet matured. He was short and thin, but his facial features were delicate. After such a long period of training, he had been under the sun all day long. Although this teenager was tanned, compared to the other recruits, he was very pale. Standing there, he did not look like a recruit. He looked more like a young master from a rich family. He was gentle, handsome, and cute. Jiang Jiao raised his spear. "You first?" "Quite considerate." He Yan smiled and said, "Then I won't be polite." She held her spear in front of her. Her eyes moved slightly and she rushed forward. Jiang Jiao's face changed and he went forward to meet her. The 2 figures were entangled in a fight. Ping 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 sounds were heard. In an instant, they seemed to have exchanged more than 10 moves. Both of them took a few steps back and looked at each other. He Yan looked at the other, her smile unchanged. Jiang Jiao looked at He Yan and could not hide his surprise. As soon as they exchanged moves, he knew that He Yan was definitely not a beginner with the spear. The 10 moves that she exchanged with him were all dangerous. He could not attack and could not retreat. They were evenly matched. He thought that he had already overestimated He Yan. He did not expect that he had underestimated her. The recruits below didn't understand. They only felt that He Yan and Jiang Jiao hadn't even exchanged a few blows before they stopped. They weren't satisfied and were somewhat dissatisfied. One after another, they discussed, "What happened just now? Who had the upper hand?" "I only drank some water. What did I miss? Did you see it?" "No, I didn't see anything." Below the stage, the head instructors looked dignified and were speechless for a long time. Du Mao looked at Liang Ping. Liang Ping hurriedly waved his hand. "I don't know. Don't ask me. He has never shown this during spear practice. I don't know." The recruits did not understand, but the head instructors saw it clearly. He Yan and Jiang Jiao exchanged moves. He Yan did not lose. Jiang Jiao underestimated, He Yan defeated. Jiang Jiao's spear arts were complex and varied, and he was as agile as a snake. He Yan's spear arts looked simple, but they contained power and could easily deflect Jiang Jiao's spear. Liang Ping was half proud and half fearful. He Yan hid his strength too well. If Jiang Jiao did not take the initiative to compete with He Yan, he would only think that He Yan was talented in bows and crossbows. His spear skills were not bad. On the stage, Jiang Jiao stared at He Yan and said, "Again." He Yan nodded. This time, it was Jiang Jiao who attacked first with his spear. He Yan met him head-on. The two spears were glued together. The red tassels fluttered in the wind. Jiang Jiao's spear was like a snake. Every attack was dangerous and urgent. It went straight for He Yan's face, but He Yan only tilted her head slightly. The tip of the spear brushed past her cheek and hit nothing. Jiang Jiao began to get serious. His spear skills were like a torrential downpour. Spear after spear, he tried to find a flaw in He Yan's defense. But miraculously, the young man was agile. Every time he narrowly dodged, the spear in his hand seemed to become an indestructible shield. It blocked Jiang Jiao's spear and prevented it from getting any closer. "Hurry up. Go faster. Just a little bit more and he'll be defeated." The recruits below the stage were anxious. Why is He Yan only defending and not attacking? Doesn't she know how to use a spear? As time passed, Jiang Jiao's spear skills could no longer support such intensive attacks. He stared at He Yan. He did not know how this seemingly weak young man had such strength and endurance. He did not seem tired at all. He was focused. So focused that it was frightening. In a trance, Jiang Jiao's spear missed its target. He was shocked. He saw the young man opposite him smile. Jiang Jiao did not have time to react. He Yan's spear, which had been defending and not attacking, suddenly stabbed in front of him. He hurriedly used his spear to block, but it was stabbed to the side. He Yan began to attack. The spear is the king of weapons. When weapons meet the spear, they will be defeated. The young man's voice was crisp. It was neither loud nor soft. The forest was empty. When he spoke, there was an echo. It was just enough to spread across the entire training field. She lowered her body and avoided Jiang Jiao's spear. Then, from bottom to top, she stabbed at Jiang Jiao's face from a tricky angle. The falling spear style is the breaking staff. The left and right flower style is the breaking card style. She moved the spear, and rushed forward again. That's right. The breaking sword, the breaking fork, the breaking shovel, the breaking double blade, the breaking short blade. Her arms seemed to have infinite strength. Even when blocked, she moved forward and stabbed at Jiang Jiao's left and right. Jiang Jiao did not have time to react. He was already in a sorry state. The hooking technique is the breaking whip, the breaking mace. She stepped forward again, the tip of her spear like a storm. Compared to Jiang Jiao's previous attacks, it was not inferior in any way. Furthermore, it was even more accurate, directly grabbing onto every single one of Jiang Jiao's weak points. The breaking short blade, the breaking halberd. Jiang Jiao had been forced to the edge of the training field. He was in a trance. He felt like the young man in front of him was riding a horse to the battlefield. Everywhere he looked, there was a murderous aura. He was like a hot knife through butter. He was unstoppable. He was forced to retreat step by step. He was utterly defeated. The long spear pounced straight at his face. Jiang Jiao hurriedly retreated. Suddenly, his feet slipped and he fell down. His ears rang with the cries of alarm from the recruits below the stage. Jiang Jiao then understood that he had no way to retreat. All of a sudden, a hand pulled him back. The spear was pointed at his forehead. It did not move forward. The young man looked thin and weak, but he was very strong. He pulled Jiang Jiao back to the training field and retracted his spear to his side. A gust of wind blew past, sweeping away the heat from before, leaving only a cool and refreshing feeling on their faces. The flag fluttered in the wind. The birds and insects in the forest chirped. The young man stood straight. His voice was still crisp. There was no tiredness or panting. He was neither fast nor slow. His voice was powerful and resonant. Men do not see a real spear, so they are obsessed with weapons. Once they have a real spear, they see weapons as child's play. Jiang Jiao looked at him in a daze. After a while, he said softly, You've read the arm record? The arm record recorded spear and blade techniques. Jiang Jiao had read it because his family ran a martial arts school. His grandfather, his father, his brother, and he had all read it. He had read it before, but he felt that what was written in the book was too exaggerated. No one could really do it. But now, he was here, and he knew that it was because he had not learned enough from this young man. The young man tilted his head and looked at him. He said with a smile, "I've read a little. I understand a little, a little." Chapter 58. The recruits below the stage looked up at He Yen. The previous dozen moves were too short for them to see who had the upper hand. However, there was no need for further explanation. He Yen forced Jiang Jiao to the edge of the stage and almost fell down. Jiang Jiao lost. This young man had won once again. "Gu is so strong," Xiaomai murmured. "He's getting stronger and stronger." Hong Shan scratched his head. "This kid didn't tell us he could do this before." "It's not his first time practicing the spear," Shi Tu said after a moment of silence. "That's why that person couldn't beat him." "But that's not right," Hong Shan said. He is the young master of a declining family. Does he come from a rich family and usually practice the bow and spear at home?" It wasn't that He Yen didn't hear the whispers of the recruits below the stage. This was an excellent opportunity. She stabbed her spear into the ground and took 2 steps forward, saying, "Brothers, I've won again today." She didn't hide the self-satisfaction on her face when she said this. It was even a bit exaggerated, which was a bit glaring. "What does this kid want to do?" Du Mao asked. No one knew what He Yen wanted to do. He Yen said with a smile, "I think there will be many people who want to challenge me in the future. Don't worry about me not accepting. I don't refuse anyone. However, we only have 1 match a day." Liang Jiaodo's mouth twitched. This guy, does he think he's setting up the arena? He Yen didn't care about the gazes of others. Whip, saber, spear, saber, equestrian archery, anything in the barracks can challenge me. Don't worry if I win, I won't take any biscuits. Come if you're willing. Even though they knew this young man had unique skills, his attitude was too arrogant. Too arrogant. How can there be such a person? He's not modest at all. He just beat someone by luck in the bow and spear. He doesn't know his place. Could it be that in the entire Frost State Guard, there is no one more powerful than him? There are tens of thousands of men, but none of them can fight? He Yen chuckled and thought to himself, it's not that there's no one who can fight. It's just that the young master who can fight the most disdains to fight with her. She said, "A gentleman's word cannot be taken back. Today, all the instructor brothers are here. I, He Yen, am a man of my word. If I win, it'll be a friendly match. If I lose, you can make any request." However, she seemed a little embarrassed. That should be impossible. It would have been better if she didn't say anything. Once she did, the recruits were once again filled with angry words. "He is looking down on us. Does he think there's no one in our Liang province guard? Everyone says that 10 fingers have different lengths. This brat thinks he's good at everything. Does he think he's General Fengyun? Forget it, forget it. In a few days, we'll see how he slaps his own face." He Yen put on an arrogant posture on the stage, then slowly walked down the stage. Before she left, she seemed to think of something and said to Jiang Jiao, who was standing to the side with an uncertain expression, "Actually, you're very good at using the spear." Jiang Jiao was stunned. He looked at her, not understanding what she meant. "But you met me. I'm the best." She laughed loudly and walked down the stage, no longer looking at Jiang Jiao's expression. On the other side, Du Mao's face was as dark as water. He Yen and Jiang Jiao's competition was nothing, but He Yen had just killed Jiang Jiao too miserably. Jiang Jiao might not be able to recover from this setback. This wasn't something he wanted to see. He patted Liang Ping's shoulder and went to Jiang Jiao's side first. He planned to properly persuade this new recruit who had been forced to stand below his horse during his first try, so as to avoid losing a good seedling. In the pavilion next to the martial arts arena. "Uncle, my big brother he won again." Cheng Lisu, who had seen everything, jumped up and pointed in He Yan's direction, as if he was the one who had just won the spear competition. He kept praising, "He's really good. No one can beat him." Xiao Ju glanced at him. She didn't want to bother with him and turned to leave. Cheng Lisu thought of something and hurriedly ran to Xiao Ju's side, jumping left and right. Uncle, look at him. He's number 1 in the bow, number 1 in the spear, and from now on, he'll be number 1 in everything. He's the number 1 in the Liang province guard, the number 1 other than you, right? Let's wait until he gets number 1. Xiao Ju replied indifferently to his enthusiasm. He's already gotten number 1 twice. It's only a matter of time before he gets the other number 1s. Also, getting number 1 twice is already very good, isn't it? Uncle, look at him. How many people in the world can you see such an outstanding talent? Isn't he worthy of joining your 9 Flags battalion? Uncle, look at him. Xiao Ju stopped in his tracks and looked at him. Cheng Lisu was delighted. He thought he had convinced Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju stared into his eyes and slowly said, "You've been mentioning He Yan a lot recently. You've mentioned the 9 Flags battalion twice. You've never paid attention to the 9 Flags battalion before," he said calmly. Cheng Lisu, are you trying to make He Yan join the 9 Flags battalion? Cheng Lisu's heart skipped a beat. He knew he was in trouble. This uncle of his was the smartest. He suspected him from the slightest clue. He said, No. I just want you to pay more attention to my big brother." Xiao Ju said, "Do you think I'm stupid or that you're smart?" Cheng Lisu stared at him for a moment, then lowered his head dejectedly. "I'm stupid. How do you know about the 9 Flags battalion?" Xiao Ju asked him. The handsome young man's gaze was calm. He did not show any signs of anger, but Cheng Lisu felt a chill run down his spine. He answered honestly, "I used to live next door to you. I overheard Chief Instructor Shen talking to you. I knew that the 9 Flags battalion was planning to recruit new recruits from the Liang province guards, so," Xiao Ju chuckled and said mockingly, "So you used this information to curry favor with your big brother?" No. I'm doing this for your sake, uncle," Cheng Lisu quickly denied. Cheng Lisu hastily denied, "I have nothing to do every day, so I walk around and look around. Among the new recruits of the Liang province guard, only big brother he has the qualifications to enter the 9 Flags battalion. The others can't even defeat my big brother he, so how can they enter your elite cavalry unit? I'm a loyal person." After a moment of silence, Xiao Ju asked, "What did he say?" Cheng Lisu was stunned at first, then he understood that Xiao Ju was referring to He Yan. He said, "After I told big brother he about this, he seemed very happy. Also, he said that he wanted to join the 9 Flags battalion." "He said he wants?" Xiao Ju asked slowly. Cheng Lisu shrunk his neck. He felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. He nodded and said, "He said he wants. Is there something wrong with that?" Xiao Ju chuckled as an indescribable emotion surfaced in his limpid eyes. A moment later, he restrained his expression and said indifferently, "This person has quite the guts, and quite the ambition as well." Chapter 59. That day, He Yan was once again in the limelight. On the way back, He Yan even ran into Wang Ba, who was hiding in the crowd. He was there to watch He Yan and Jiang Jiao compete. He wanted to leave after watching, but unfortunately, He Yan saw him. He Yan greeted him from afar, "Brother Wang." Under everyone's gaze, Wang Ba's face darkened. He braced himself and called out "Boss" in a voice as soft as a mosquito's buzz. He Yan looked at him with a smile. He turned around and left as if someone was chasing him from behind. "Higo, you're really something," Xiaomai said enviously. "Things like this will happen more often in the future. You have to get used to it." He Yan stood on his tiptoes and rubbed Xiaomai's head. Hong Shan saw this and snorted, "You still want to be his boss? You should grow taller first." He Yan shrugged. Man proposes, God disposes. Growing taller was something that couldn't be forced. Perhaps because he was in a good mood, He Yan had a dream when he went back to sleep after secretly practicing as usual. In the dream, she was standing on the high platform of the martial arts arena. Everyone around her was calling her boss. Cheng Lisu ran over and said to her with a smile, "Brother He, you've entered the 9 Flags battalion." "Really?" She was very happy. Then she heard a voice, "He Rufei?" She turned around and saw Xiao Ju. He stared at her coldly and said sarcastically, Are you He Yen or He Rufei? Hufei. When she heard this name, she suddenly woke up from her dream. She sat up and touched her head. She was already sweating profusely. The sky was bright outside. Hong Shan opened the window and saw her wiping her sweat. He said casually, "It's been so hot these days. I think it's going to rain soon. After a few rounds of rain, the weather will turn cold. Damn it, I don't want to spend the summer in the Liangzhou guards anymore. I've lost a layer of skin from the heat." He Yen smiled, but he was still a little uneasy. Seeing this, Xiao Mai asked curiously, "He Gu doesn't look well. Is he suffering from the heat? Would you like some tea leaves?" "No, it's just hot." He Yen got out of bed and put on his shoes. "I'll be fine after I sweat it out." After the morning run, he went to the training field to practice martial arts. Today, he was going to practice his saber techniques. As he practiced, a group of people walked over and stopped in front of He Yen. He Yen put down the knife in his hand. "Do you mean what you said yesterday?" the leader asked in a deep voice. This was a bald man with dragon eyebrows, leopard neck, and iron bones. He wore a string of Buddhist beads around his neck. The Buddhist beads shone with a dark light, and each bead was the size of a finger. His hands were holding a large saber with a golden back. He was a lot older than He Yen. He must have passed the age of 40, perhaps he had already reached the mandate of heaven. However, he didn't look the slightest bit relaxed or tired. He was like a taut bear. "My name is Huang Xiong," the bald man said in a muffled voice. "I want to compare notes on saber techniques with you." The surrounding recruits who were eavesdropping on their conversations suddenly became excited. There's someone. So soon, there's someone. I told you, there are tens of thousands of heroes in the Liangzhou guards. How could we not find someone to teach this kid a lesson? Yes. Destroy his prestige and avenge our biscuit. I think He Yen won't be able to maintain his prestige this time. Look at the saber in Huang Xiong's hand. It's not an ordinary weapon. I'm afraid he used to be a ranger. He Yen also noticed the saber in Huang Xiong's hand. The body of the saber was red, the back of the saber was extremely thick, the blade was sharp, and the tip was flat and slightly curved. This kind of saber was very heavy. An ordinary person would find it difficult to wield it. However, it was perfect for a hero like Huang Xiong to wield. "You have a good saber," He Yen praised. Hearing this, Huang Xiong's gaze softened slightly. He said, "It's an old friend of mine for 30 years. He Yen was speechless. He couldn't help but think of his own Qinglang sword. She was now a new recruit and came out in a hurry. She wasn't like Huang Xiong who brought his saber to Liangzhou. She wasn't used to not having a suitable weapon. At this time, she was very envious of Huang Xiong. Huang Xiong saw that He Yen didn't respond. He frowned and said, "Didn't you say yesterday that you wouldn't refuse anyone? Are you not going to accept the challenge now?" He Yen was surprised for a moment. He smiled and said, "No, I'm a man of my words. I can do it now." Under everyone's gaze, she calmly walked up to the high platform of the training field. Below the platform, Liang Ping looked at He Yan's movements with a numb expression. Du Mao leaned against a tree and said gloatingly, "He Yen, your subordinate, really knows how to stir up trouble." Liang Ping wanted to go up and slap He Yen. If Du Mao hadn't been so meddlesome yesterday and suggested that Jiang Jiao and He Yen fight, He Yen wouldn't have gone to the training field. He wouldn't have said such nonsense like setting up the arena. Today's events wouldn't have happened. Now that even Chief Instructor Shin had tacitly agreed to it, Liang Ping couldn't stop it. He could only pray silently in his heart that He Yen would be blessed by good luck today and that he would be able to pass the day peacefully. Cheng Lisu stayed in Xiaoju's room. He was bored to death and was scribbling on the small table. His uncle was reading a book sent from Beijing. He didn't know what it was, but he didn't stop reading it the whole morning. Cheng Lisu felt a little bored. He was thinking about whether he should go out and look at the training field to find some entertainment for himself. Someone knocked on the door. Xiaoju said, "Come in." It was Shen Han who came in. Shen Han walked to Xiaoju's side and whispered a few words to Xiaoju. Cheng Lisu moved his chair to the other side and tried his best to listen. He heard a few words. Tian. Huang Xiong, sword duel, training field. For the first time, Cheng Lisu's brain, which had always been slow, came into use. He thought for a moment and understood what was going on. Someone wanted to compete with He Yan in the saber, and that person was in the martial arts arena right now. He suddenly became excited. His brother was indeed worthy of his title. Yesterday, he said that someone would come to challenge him today. He wanted to go and see now. Cheng Lisu secretly put down the pen and paper in his hand. While Xiao Ju's back was facing him, he gave Shen Han a look and tiptoed out of the room. When he reached the door, Xiao Ju said lightly, "Cheng Lisu." Cheng Lisu was speechless. He answered with a sullen face. He felt strange in his heart. His uncle didn't have more eyes than others, so why was he always caught every time he wanted to do something? Cheng Lisu jogged to Xiao Ju and said shyly, "Uncle, I'm just going to take a look. My brother is having a sword duel with someone. How can I not go? I have to be loyal. I'll come back to practice my calligraphy after I'm done. I promise I won't be late." Xiao Ju looked up at him. "Did I say you can't go?" Cheng Lisu suddenly smiled. "Why didn't you say so earlier? I'll go then." He turned around and was about to run away. Xiao Ju said, "Wait." Cheng Lisu looked at him suspiciously. Cheng Lisu stood up and walked out with Shen Han. "I'll go too." Cheng Lisu was stunned. "Isn't your brother going to enter the 9 Flags Battalion?" The young man smiled. "I also want to see how he plans to enter the 9 Flags Battalion." Chapter 60. He Yan was thinking seriously in front of the weapon rack beside the high platform in the martial arts practice field. She didn't use many knives in the past, so it was really inconvenient. Most of the knives on the weapon rack were willow leaf knives and large ring knives, which weren't very convenient for her. She thought about it again and again, then reached out and picked up a small knife on the lowest shelf. The recruits who were staring at her movements were all stunned when they saw this. Those who didn't understand asked, "Why is this knife so small? It's not even as long as a person's arm." Jiang Jiao was very knowledgeable. Upon seeing this, he said, "This is a pair of mandarin duck blades. It's not just one blade." The mandarin duck knives were indeed not big, only as long as a person's forearm. The 2 knives were sealed in the same scabbard and could be hidden in sleeves or boots. The blade was wide and thick, only a few inches in front of the tip of the knife, making it easy to backhand and block. He Yan slowly pulled the knives out of the scabbard. One was slightly longer and the other was slightly shorter. Because very few people usually used mandarin duck knives, the knives were actually quite new. "Not bad," she praised in her heart. She played with it in her hand and felt that it was okay. Wang Ba also came to the bottom of the platform and saw the mandarin duck knives in He Yan's hand. He was stunned for a moment and said, "He actually uses mandarin duck knives?" Huang Xiong on the platform was also puzzled. He saw He Yan pick the knives again and again. After picking this one, he looked at He Yan differently and asked, "Double knives?" He Yan nodded. "Double knives? I didn't expect you to know how to use double knives at such a young age." Huang Xiong said, "You really know everything?" He Yan answered humbly, "It's all forced by life." The people below didn't feel good when they heard this. Du Mao reached out and touched Liang Ping. "What does He Yan's family do? Forced by life? How can he be proficient in all 18 kinds of martial arts? Was he kidnapped when he was young and became a street performer?" "You're asking me, but who should I ask?" Liang Ping said angrily. He even knew how to use mandarin duck knives. Who would use mandarin duck knives in a decent family? Most mandarin duck knives were used by the underworld. What kind of person was this? Without another word, Huang Xiong slowly drew his long saber from its scabbard and nodded slightly at He Yan. "Brother He, please enlighten me." He Yan thought to himself, how could it be little brother? Even if she was 19 years old in her previous life, she should still call Huang Xiong uncle. Now, Cheng Lisu called him big brother. If he followed Cheng Lisu, he should call Xiao Ju uncle. Now, he called Xiao Ju uncle, but Huang Xiong big brother? Huang Xiong was old enough to be a Xiao Ju's father. As she was thinking this, Xiao Mai below the stage cried out, "He Gu, be careful." Then she saw Huang Xiong rushing over with a knife. The golden-backed broadsword was wielded vigorously by this big man. He tilted the tip of the sword to the left and slightly shifted his right foot. He turned around and slashed at He Yan. He Yan was startled. She crouched down to avoid the attack and used the back of her saber to push the tip of the opponent's saber away. With the kite saber in front and the mandarin duck knife behind, she also closed in on Huang Xiong. Huang Xiong's brute strength was great. With a heavy swing, he knocked away He Yan's saber. He Yan aimed at him and threw her saber. Huang Xiong tilted his head to avoid it. He Yan flipped over and raised her head to catch the throwing saber. The two of them retreated a few steps and were in a deadlock. They stared at each other. Huang Xiong was not Jiang Jiao. After all, Jiang Jiao was still young. Huang Xiong's saber had been with him for 30 years. The man and the saber had already formed an excellent tacit understanding. When they fought, He Yan had already experienced that this man's skill was above hers. He Yan had to end the fight quickly. Otherwise, she would be slapping her own face. He Yan calculated in her heart. Huang Xiong's heart was also in turmoil. For so many years, he had fought with thousands of people. Some were good, some were bad. But this youngster was so young. Just now, he threw and caught the saber smoothly and smoothly. How did he do it? Did he start using a saber when he was 3 years old? He Yan thought that Huang Xiong was tall and sturdy. His saber technique was fierce but clumsy. He lost because he was not nimble enough. It seemed that her choice of the mandarin duck knife was just right. This way, she could defeat him in terms of speed. Her eyes moved slightly. "Continue," she shouted and stepped forward to meet him. Huang Xiong held the saber in his right hand. He took a diagonal step to the left and thrust his saber straight at He Yan. He Yan's mandarin duck knife stabbed forward and clashed with him. Although she looked thin and small, her strength was not weak. The two sabers stuck together, but He Yan still had another saber. She twirled the other saber, bent her elbow and raised the back of the saber above her head. She stabbed at Huang Xiong. Huang Xiong could not dodge in time. A corner of his clothes was cut off. In a split second, the audience in the martial arts arena cried out in alarm. From this moment on, everyone discovered that He Yan's movements began to become faster. Her footwork was extremely nimble. One saber went to entangle Huang Xiong's golden broadsword. The other saber was like a snake waiting for an opportunity to strike. Although Huang Xiong was not stabbed by her, he could no longer gain an advantage. The single saber was fierce, the double sabers were nimble. Using softness to overcome hardness, the weak to overcome the strong. You just asked me to teach you. I just remembered that our double sabers have a song formula. Unexpectedly, she still had time to talk. I'll read it to you. Huang Xiong stared blankly. She took advantage of the opportunity to throw her sharp saber at him again. The north wind in June gives birth to 2 arms. Using both left and right as one. She held a long saber in each hand. Her posture was elegant. 2 arms intertwined before my eyes. Later than Yu Yang obtaining the lone sword. The long sabers danced, making it difficult for people to see the youth's expression. They could only hear his laughter. Using one hand alone, swift as lightning. Only the position of the clapper has been learned. She pressed forward step by step, but did not panic. Only knowing that the former saber is not enough, using both left and right is trivial. The saber swept toward Huang Xiong's neck. Huang Xiong narrowly avoided it. Using the sword today, using the right saber. Obtaining the position of the clapper, using the left. One left, one right. She used them skillfully and freely. He only felt that the saber was her hand. Her hand was like the blade. On the martial arts arena, she was chanting and dancing. Corresponding to her neither fast nor slow voice, her movements were as fast as lightning. The clashing of sabers and sabers made a clanging sound. It made people's hearts clench. When Cheng Lisu and the others came over, they saw this scene. "Uncle, look, I told you my big brother will win," he shouted excitedly. His shout attracted the attention of the people around him. Someone recognized Xiao Ju and immediately shouted excitedly, "It's Commander-in-Chief, Military Governor Xiao. General Fengyun has come to the martial arts arena." General Fengyun? With that said, the recruit's eyes were instantly attracted to Xiao Ju. The noise spread to the martial arts arena. He Yan's ears twitched. Xiaoju? She turned her head to look. Sure enough, not far from the martial arts arena, standing next to Shenhan and Cheng Lisu was Xiaoju. The youth was wearing a dark blue robe embroidered with red crown cranes. He had a graceful bearing and a picturesque face. He did not look like a picture scroll with the recruits who filled the martial arts arena. This side was rough and deep, while his side was bright and clear. He Yan could not see his expression clearly because they were too far apart. Presumably, he also had an indifferent and aloof appearance. She did not expect that Xiaoju would personally come to watch her compete. Did this mean that her performance yesterday had finally reached the ears of the people who should have heard of it? Did Xiaoju notice that she was such an outstanding talent? Big brother, be careful. While she was thinking, she heard Cheng Lisu's exclamation. She looked up and saw that the golden saber was already in front of her. Chapter 61. The sharp edge of the blade was right in front of his eyes, and there seemed to be a faint smell of blood. This scene fell into the eyes of the audience, and they all burst into exclamations. Liang Ping couldn't help but blurt out, "Be careful." Saber techniques were different from spear techniques. Spear techniques were more dangerous than crossbow techniques, and saber techniques were more dangerous than spear techniques. If he wasn't careful, he would bleed. Moreover, Huang Xiong was too strong. If he couldn't hold back his saber, he would be in trouble. This kid was usually careless, but how could he be distracted at a time like this? Liang Ping was anxious. Being distracted during a saber competition was a big taboo. Huang Xiong saw this opportunity and immediately slashed at He Yan. Seeing that he couldn't dodge and the saber was about to reach his neck, the youth suddenly raised his head and revealed a sly smile. Oh no, Huang Xiong thought to himself. Just as he was about to withdraw his saber, He Yan's saber in his left hand had already reached his long saber, and the saber in his right hand had already circled behind him. In a panic, Huang Xiong bent his body to avoid, but he saw the youth's smile widen. When he withdrew his hands, both sabers were in his hands. The Mandarin duck double saber slashed at Huang Xiong's head. Huang Xiong wanted to reach out to block, but it was too late. The blade stopped in front of his forehead, but because of the sharp edge, a small wound appeared on his forehead, and a trace of blood flowed out. The audience was silent. After a while, He Yan withdrew his saber from his side, took out a wrinkled handkerchief, and handed it to him. "Thank you for letting me win." Huang Xiong looked at He Yan's handkerchief, but didn't take it. Instead he asked, "Just now, you weren't distracted. Was that a trick?" "All's fair in war." He Yan smiled. "What do you think?" She had been doing things for so many years, so of course she knew that she couldn't let her guard down at any time. She had to be even more focused during a competition. Just now, even if the emperor came, she wouldn't have been shaken, let alone Xiaoju. However, Huang Xiong's swordsmanship was exquisite. She wasn't good at using swords. If she didn't use some tricks, how could she win so easily? It was just a deliberate distraction to lure Huang Xiong into the trap, but it turned out to be the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Speaking of which, she was quite smart. Xiaoju probably wouldn't have thought that the person he called stupid back then had already learned how to use his wits and wit. Thinking of this, He Yan proudly looked down the stage, wanting to see if Xiaoju was looking at him with adoration. However, when she looked around, Xiaoju was nowhere to be seen. Even Shenhan was nowhere to be seen. Only Cheng Lisu was waving at her excitedly, waving his hairband. He left just like that? He Yan stared blankly. Then did he see her charm or not? Before she could figure it out, a large group of people surrounded her with a whoosh sound. She had been in the limelight again today. Half of the Liang province guards recruits were completely convinced by her. Her bow, spear, and swordsmanship were all so exquisite. She was like a crane in a flock of chickens. However, half of the people couldn't stand her arrogance. They only said, only using schemes and tricks isn't the right way. If you have the ability, fight fair and square. It's because you know you can't beat your opponent that you have to resort to trickery. That only shows that she's smart. Someone retorted. Wang Ba mixed in with the recruits and walked out. His heart was filled with complicated feelings. On one hand, he hoped that He Yan would keep winning. This would show that He Yan was a true powerhouse. It was understandable that he lost to a powerhouse. After all, no one in the Liang province guards could beat him. However, on the other hand, Wang Ba wasn't satisfied. Why did so many people lose to He Yan? Why did he have to call He Yan boss? Why? However, when he thought about it, Huang Xiong was already in his 40s. Losing to a 16-year-old youth seemed to be a bit worse than losing to him. When he thought of this, Wang Ba felt a bit better. He temporarily let out a breath of turbid air. In the forest at the foot of Liang Province's White Moon Mountain, two people were walking slowly. The vegetation in the forest was dense, blocking out the sunlight. It was cool and refreshing. There were also birds chirping. White Moon Mountain was the best in terms of scenery. You just watched the competition on the martial arts stage, Xiao Ju said. What do you think? Shen Han thought carefully for a moment, thought again and again, then opened his mouth to say, Liang Ping took in a good soldier, He Yan is a good seedling. To be able to reach such a level in bow, spear, and saber techniques, one must be a rare talent. It's really not easy for him to be like this. You can't find a second person like him in this batch of recruits. How's his swordsmanship? Xiao Ju asked again. From the looks of it, He Yan's swordsmanship isn't as skillful as Huang Xiong's. His advantage lies in his nimble footwork, lively mind, and flexible mind. He knows how to use tactics, Shen Han answered. He Yan's shortcomings were very obvious. If this competition had been dragged on for another 15 minutes, He Yan would have been at a disadvantage. He probably knew this himself, so he pretended to be distracted and caused Huang Xiong to impulsively attack. In the end, he defeated Huang Xiong. What do you think of him joining the Nine Flags Battalion? Xiao Ju asked carelessly. This youth is so young, but he's already scheming. He doesn't show off his bravado. He's also skilled in archery and horse riding. His martial arts are outstanding, and I heard that he can read. If we were to choose him from this batch of recruits, he would be the best choice, Shen Han said carefully. You think so too? Xiao Ju turned around. Her tone was non-committal. Shen Han observed the young man's expression. Xiao family's young commander-in-chief had always been expressionless. At this moment, his expression was calm and nothing could be seen. However, Shen Han felt that he didn't seem to agree with his opinion. Commander-in-chief, do you think there's something wrong with him? There's something wrong with this person, Xiao Ju said. Shen Han was stunned. Today, he competed with swordsmanship. His swordsmanship wasn't considered skillful, but the footwork he used was trained by the infantry of the assault battalion. When the infantry of the assault battalion entered the battlefield, they would rush to the front at any time. Because they might die, their footwork was extremely flexible. When He Yan competed with Huang Xiong, his swordsmanship wasn't as good as Huang Xiong's, but he dodged every one of Huang Xiong's attacks. He could tell at a glance that his subconscious dodging and retreating was from the assault battalion. He Yan probably noticed it himself. He was afraid that others would find out, so he deliberately changed it. However, sometimes one wouldn't remember every subconscious move. Shen Han said, How is this possible? He's only 16. Has he already been on the battlefield before? It's because it's impossible that there's something wrong with him, Xiao Ju said. Now that the situation was tense, Shen Han had to be cautious. He hesitated for a moment and asked Xiao Ju, Commander-in-Chief, what should we do now? I want to test this person, Xiao Ju replied. Commander-in-Chief, how do you plan to test him? Didn't he set up an arena in the martial arts arena? 1 match a day, and he'll win every match. Tomorrow, pick 3 instructors and compete with him in riding and shooting. Shen Han was stunned. He hesitated for a moment. That's not good, right? If he wins. If He Yan won, what would the recruits think of their instructors? They couldn't even beat a soldier. Xiao Ju stopped in his tracks and said calmly, If he wins, there's definitely something wrong with him. There's no such genius in the world. Even if there was, it wouldn't appear in the Liang province guards. Chapter 62. On this day, He Yan was surrounded by the new recruits who came to befriend her until midnight. She had promised many people to teach them her swordsmanship, but she was only able to do so in the middle of the night. Because it was too late, she did not plan to go to the martial arts field to train at night. Xiao Mai lay facing her with one hand behind her head. Her eyes were bright as she said to her, "A Higu is so impressive today." "Tell me," He Yan muttered to herself for a while, then said, "When I was sparring with Uncle Huang today, did Military Governor Xiao finish watching?" She was still thinking about Xiao Ju during the day. How could Xiao Ju leave without watching her exquisite swordsmanship? Wouldn't that be a waste of her efforts? Perhaps Xiao Ju thought that her swordsmanship was so ordinary that it was not worth her attention? Xiao Mai did not expect He Yan to ask about this. She tried hard to recall, then said, "The governor came for a while, then left. But you were too nervous at the end of the sparring session. We were all watching you, so we didn't see when he left. He should have finished watching, right?" He Yan turned over worriedly. "He Gu, do you really want the governor to see it?" Xiao Mai asked. "Of course, I want to learn martial arts and sell it to the imperial family. I have to sell it first." He didn't even watch it. How would he know that I'm the best in the Liang province guards? Hong Shan's slow voice came from the other side. "Now that your reputation as the best in the Liang province guards has spread far and wide, don't worry. In a few days, there will be people looking for you to compete in this and that. There will be countless opportunities like this. Military Governor Xiao will see it one day." "That's good," He Yan thought to himself, then closed his eyes. Hong Shan was right. Early the next morning, right after the weight-bearing run, before he could go to the martial arts field to practice his crossbow, Liang Ping walked in front of He Yan. "Come here." He Yan didn't know what was going on, so he followed them. When he reached the long path behind the training field, he saw two people leading 3 horses towards them. He Yan also remembered their faces. They were both instructors of the Liangzhou Guards Institution. One of them was called Du Mao, and he often came to talk to Liang Ping. The other was a short old man with grizzled hair. His name was Ma Damei. "Liang Jiaodo, this is..." He Yan did not understand. Could it be that he wanted her to be a coach because she was very outstanding? How could a recruit be an instructor? This wasn't the way to get promoted. Besides, she didn't want to be an instructor in the Liang Province Guard. Fortunately, Liang Ping's words put her at ease. Liang Ping said, "Didn't you say on the martial arts platform a few days ago that you could accept any challenge from the Liang Province Guard, and that you would win every single one of them?" Although He Yan did not understand what he meant, he still nodded and replied, "That's right. Then today, the 3 of us will compete with you in horseback archery." Du Mao stepped forward and handed the reins to He Yan. "Let's compete now." He Yan was slightly surprised. "You want to compete with me?" She had set up this arena to make a name for herself among the recruits. She had never thought about becoming an instructor. What's wrong with these instructors? They're not young men. Why are they so hot-headed that they want to compete with me? Are they plotting something? Her wary gaze fell into their eyes. That thin old man with grizzled hair, Ma Damei, smiled and said, "What's wrong? Young man, are you afraid to compete with us instructors? I thought you had guts. You're scared just because of this?" Ma Damei's face was full of wrinkles when he smiled, but it was not ugly. Instead, it was as amiable as a family elder. However, He Yan knew that this person was not as amiable as he appeared to be. From what he heard, every word and sentence was meant to provoke her. However, since she had already said so much, if she really didn't go, she would be known as a coward. Xiao Ju was someone who couldn't tolerate sand in his eyes, so he probably wouldn't let her go to the 9 Flags Battalion. Thinking of this, she laughed heartily. "How could that be? I'm just afraid that I'll embarrass myself in front of you instructors, so I'm a bit hesitant. Since you instructors are willing to teach me, how could I not appreciate your kindness? Let's compete. One match it is." Liang Ping and the other 2 looked at each other and nodded. But He Yan was now a famous person in the Liang Province Guards. Whenever there was a disturbance, everyone would know about it. Once the news that the 3 instructors wanted to compete with He Yan in riding and archery came out, all of the recruits immediately went crazy. They wanted to go and watch, but were stopped by their instructors and only allowed to train in the martial arts field. Naturally, This was Shin Han's arrangement. Although Xiaoju only said that they wanted to test He Yan, they could not use the reputation of all of the Liang province guards as a test. It was better to be safe than sorry. If He Yan won, then in the future, would the recruits obey He Yan or their instructors? It was hard to say. Therefore it was better to hide. The recruits could not go and watch this show. Cheng Li Su, who was not a recruit, could not either. He was locked in a room in the Liang province guards. There were also guards outside, so he could not go out. He did not know that He Yan was going to compete in riding and archery. When he was suddenly locked up, he thought that something had happened to the Liang province guards. He pounded on the door and said, "What happened? Is there a riot? Why can't you let me go out? Uncle, why are you locking me up?" The emotionless voice of the guard came from outside. "Young master, the governor said that you have to finish copying the Zhaoming Wen anthology 3 times before you can go out. I think you want me to die. Why don't you just kill me?" Cheng Li Su sat down in front of the table angrily. 3 times? He would not be able to finish copying in a month. Outside, Shen Han and Xiaoju were walking out. Shen Han looked behind him and said, "Young Master Cheng seems to like He Yan a lot. If He Yan really has a problem, is it possible that he has other motives for approaching young Master Cheng?" "It's very possible." Xiaoju said. Cheng Li Su was the one who told him about the 9 Flags Battalion. Shen Han was silent for a moment before saying, "If that's the case, then it's really bad." There were actually people with ulterior motives among the recruits of the Liang province guards. He Yan was one of them, but he was definitely not the only one. If there were other people, they would be in a very passive position. What was even more frightening was that they did not know anything about this. If Xiaoju did not happen to be here this time and saw that He Yan's movements were different, the entire Liang province guards would have become someone else's property. As the two of them spoke, they had already reached the side of the horse path in the martial arts field. He Yan and the other 3 people were standing at the end of the path, each holding a horse. First, it was Liang Ping, then Du Mao, then Ma Demiai, and finally He Yan. They all mounted their horses. He Yan stood at the furthest side, and her horse was also the smallest. Probably to take care of her figure, she flipped onto the horse. Her movements were skillful. She held the reins in one hand and carried a quiver and longbow on her back. Her majestic appearance did not seem like the weak young man that they usually saw. He Yan did not even have a riding suit. The sunlight shone on his red clothes, gilding his delicate features with a layer of special heroic spirit. He Yan had a smile on his lips. His appearance of a golden saber and armored horse actually resembled the stunning charm of a young general. Shen Han stole a glance at Xiaoju beside him. The latter's expression was lazy and indifferent. He did not know what she was thinking, but Shen Han knew that for a moment, He Yan was actually a little similar to him. Chapter 63. Liang Jiaodo, you still haven't told me, how do we compete in horseback archery? He Yan looked at Liang Ping, who was beside him. Do we compete in who has more game, or who can reach the end of the track first? Before Liang Ping could speak, Ma Demiai spoke first. He smiled and said, "Young man, in the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, we will run a lap around here. This is the starting point and also the end. There is a grass target at the bend of the track ahead. The 4 of us have different feather arrows, so we will shoot at the bend. Whoever finishes shooting and returns to this point first will win." He Yan listened and nodded. Okay. Liang Ping couldn't help but look at him. The sentence this young man said the most was, whether it was to Wang Ba, Jiang Jiao, or Huang Xiong, or now to these instructors, he still said okay. They didn't know when he would say no. Then let's start. Du Mao pulled the reins. Someone behind him blew a horn. The 4 horses were like arrows leaving the bowstring. In the blink of an eye, they were more than 10 meters away, leaving only billowing smoke behind. He Yan's horse was much more obedient than the one she had at the capital's drill ground. He Sui must have been specially trained by someone. She only needed to give a few instructions, and the horse would understand. She also noticed that among the other 3 instructors, although Liang Ping and Du Mao's equestrian skills were good, they were not as good as the ordinary-looking Ma Demiai. Ma Demiai's equestrian skills were on par with hers. Perhaps she was better, but she didn't show it. She observed the 3 instructors, and the others were also observing her. Du Mao glanced over and his eyes almost popped out. Yan didn't use a horsewhip? She wrapped the horsewhip around her arm and commanded the horse to gallop. However, she used her hand to gently pat the horse's body. This wasn't the capital's young master going on a scenic tour. What was he doing? The most surprising thing was that he was so casual that he didn't fall behind the instructors. He was running neck and neck with Du Mao. He even had the mood to smile at Du Mao. Du Mao immediately turned his head away. The steed galloped like a shooting star and arrived at the bend in the blink of an eye. Yan reached for the quiver on his back, took out several arrows, and was about to shoot at the grass targets on both sides. This target was not as big as the one at the training field. It was only the size of a palm and was not obvious. If one used a crossbow, it would not be easy to hit it. It also depended on the person's eyesight and movements. Just as Yan was about to shoot, Liang Ping and Du Mao looked at each other. One in front, the other behind, they suddenly exerted their strength. The 2 horses squeezed toward Yan's side, pushing Yan's horse to one side, so that the arrow in his hand could not be shot. Yan was jolted a few times by the frightened horse, and hastily pulled on the reins to steady himself. She looked at Liang Ping and Du Mao. The 2 of them were shooting arrows as if nothing had happened. Du Mao even said to her, "Yan, you have to be careful. Don't fall." It was as if they weren't the ones who had just touched her. Yan raised his eyebrows. Really, on the competition field, she never understood the word forgive. They disturbed her archery. How could she just let it go like that? Liang Ping and Du Mao had already shot their arrows, but they saw a green arrow shoot out from the side. With a dong sound, the arrow was cut in half. The arrow changed direction and fell to the ground. The 2 of them looked at Yan at the same time. Yan shrugged and said, "Instructor, why do you look like you're not very skilled?" Liang Ping, this young man was too vengeful. His mouth was also unforgiving. He was really arrogant. Yan was about to shoot again, but before she could pull out the arrow, her body jolted again. The old man, Ma Damii, had already caught up from behind. He smiled at Yan and said, "Young man, don't be anxious. Take your time." Yan couldn't draw the bow. As soon as she moved, the 3 of them would follow from behind, from the front, from the left and right, and touched her as if nothing had happened. The horses were frequently frightened, so she couldn't aim at the bullseye. After a few times, Yan could see that the 3 instructors were deliberately opposing her. Although she didn't understand why, it was probably part of the competition. If they wanted her to be unable to shoot, even if she returned to the end of the track first, it wouldn't be considered a victory. She was outnumbered. Moreover, this was a competition of archery. She couldn't fight with these instructors. However, Yan couldn't just let it go like this. Yan's eyes moved slightly. She muttered, "Want to scheme against me? No way." She suddenly raised her arm. The horsewhip wrapped around her arm uncoiled and fell in the wind, making a crisp sound. Du Mao frowned. From the beginning to the end, Yan hadn't used the horsewhip. It was rare to see someone who could skillfully ride a horse without a horsewhip. But now that Yan was doing this, could it be that she couldn't handle it and had to use the horsewhip again? Yan was thinking when suddenly she raised her head and smiled at him. Du Mao had a bad premonition. The next moment he saw the horsewhip flying towards him. Du Mao was shocked and instinctively dodged. Yan actually dared to hurt people. When he moved sideways, the quiver behind him was exposed in front of everyone. The horsewhip didn't fall on Du Mao's body. Instead, it wrapped around the arrows in the quiver. Yan stretched out her hand and pulled. The horsewhip loosened in midair, and the arrows fell into the wind. Liang Ping, who witnessed the whole process, was stunned. Before he could react, Yan's horsewhip was aimed at him. He was shocked and hurriedly urged his horse to dodge. But this time, it was Yan's turn to attack. How could he escape? With a pole and a hook, all the arrows in his quiver were thrown to the ground. Yan. Du Mao's face was livid. "I think the instructors don't want me to shoot." Yan didn't seem to see his ugly face. She smiled and said, "But I don't want to lose. There's no other way." Let's stop shooting. Whoever runs faster wins, right? Ha! Ma Damiai's laughter came from behind. He didn't have a trace of nervousness or anger. Instead, he was full of interest. You're quite smart. I wonder if you'll take my arrows? Hien smiled. How can I? I don't intend to take your arrows. Ma Damiai's equestrian skills were excellent. It was difficult for her to touch his arrows. But it didn't matter. As long as there was no target to shoot at, he could only compete with her to reach the finish line first. She and Ma Damiai went side by side. When she shot an arrow, Ma Damiai shot an arrow to block. When Ma Damiai shot an arrow, Hien shot an arrow to block. The two of them had left Liang Ping and Du Mao behind. No one was faster than the other. Thus, in a stalemate, they passed the last bend. No one hit the target. Now, they could only compete to reach the finish line first. Ma Damiai looked at Hien and smiled. Young man, you're really good. He waved his horsewhip. Suddenly, the horse rushed forward. Just now, he didn't use all his skills. Hien looked at his back and praised, There's really someone better than you. He squeezed the horse's belly and followed. Chapter 64. The horse was agile, its hooves stirred up the wind, and as fast as lightning, it galloped straight to the finish line. Hien and Ma Damiai were neck and neck. If this continued, it would be hard to tell who would reach the finish line first. Liang Ping and Du Mao had already given up. They knew that their equestrian skills were not as good as the two in front of them, and they could not catch up. They simply strolled slowly behind them. Anyway, they had already done what Chief Instructor Shin asked them to do. Chief Instructor Shin called them out last night and asked them to compete with Hien in equestrian archery today. At first, Liang Ping and Du Mao both refused. They were not recruits, so why should they compete with Hien? But Chief Instructor insisted that they do this. He also asked them to create trouble for Hien as much as possible during the equestrian archery journey, and not let Hien win. Liang Ping felt very uncomfortable. They wanted to compete with Hien, but they could not let Hien win. Wasn't this deliberately unfair? Comparing their instructor and the recruits was already bullying, and the three of them teamed up to deal with Hien. It was simply the worst kind of bullying. Who knew that man proposes, God disposes? Not to mention the three of them, he and Du Mao did not bully Hien. Instead, they were bullied by Hien. Fortunately, the recruits did not see it. If they saw it, where would they put their old faces? But among the three of them, Ma Damiai was an expert in equestrian skills. How would Hien compare with her? From afar, they could see the red silk cloth on the flagpole at the finish line. Hien pulled the reins, and the horse moved forward, half a step ahead of Ma Damiai. She wanted to rush to the finish line, but at this time, Ma Damiai shouted, "Little guy." Hien subconsciously looked at him. She saw the little old man standing upright with his 2 feet on the horse's back. He was very stable. She praised him in her heart. Then the old man smiled at her, turned his body, and swept toward Hien. Hien was startled. He urged his horse to evade, but the old man was like a bat with wings. Half of his body was already hanging on Hien's horse. He even pursed his lips and reprimanded Hien for urging the horse to avoid him. "Young man, how can you be so unkind at such a young age? Do you want me to fall to my death?" Hien wanted to push Hien down, but this man had already taken over the magpie's nest, holding the reins firmly in his hand. He struck his palm toward Hien, intending to knock him down. This person was really full of confidence in her. Wasn't he afraid that something would happen to her if she fell? Hien cursed in his heart. He exchanged 2 more moves with him, but neither of them was able to gain an advantage. Ma Damiai was also surprised. The dozens of instructors of the Liang State Guard all had their own strengths. Some of them were proficient in bows and crossbows, while others were proficient in foot encirclement. However, he was most proficient in horseback archery. Yesterday, Shin Han had asked him to compete with Hien today. At first, he thought Shin Han was crazy, but now, it seemed that this young man named Hien had greatly exceeded his expectations. His riding skills were exquisite, and his mind was nimble and decisive. He knew that it would be difficult for the three of them to hit the grass target, so he simply knocked away all of the other people's arrows. At this moment, the two moves he exchanged with him were not chaotic at all. It was as if he often exchanged blows with others in critical situations. He was very calm. He Yen, on the other hand, was not as calm as he appeared. The instructors of the Liang State Guard weren't people who only knew how to eat and not do anything. This old man was truly difficult to deal with. Seeing that the finish line was too close, her goal was not to exchange blows with him, but to cross the finish line first. If this continued, even if the horse reached the finish line, with both her and the old man on the horse, who would win? How treacherous! When she raised her head, her face was also full of smiles, without a trace of displeasure. Although I am young, I know how to respect my elders. You are already so old, yet you are still riding with me. If you fall, even 10,000 deaths would not be enough to absolve me of the blame. I'd better switch horses. As she spoke, she leaned forward and grabbed the iron ring on the horse's saddle with both hands. She leaned against the horse and let go. This move was truly beautiful. Ma Damiai's eyes couldn't help but light up. He Yen grabbed the iron ring with one hand and used the whip in his other hand to wrap around Ma Damiai's empty horse not far away. When the two horses drew closer, He Yen let go and half of his body jumped onto the other horse. He grabbed the reins and flipped himself onto the horse again. Good. Ma Damiai said good 3 times in a row. She looked at He Yen with undisguised admiration. However, he smiled and said, "But if you think you can win like this, you're still too inexperienced." Before she finished speaking, the horse under He Yan's body violently struggled and refused to move forward. Instead, it stood on the spot as if it had gone mad. "This is my own horse. It recognizes its master. Young man, your horsemanship is not bad. But if the horse recognizes its master, you won't be able to control it." He laughed loudly, as if He Yan's move was exactly what he wanted. He was just waiting to see He Yan make a scene. The young man smiled slightly. His voice was not nervous at all. He calmly replied, "I'll still try. What if I can control it again?" After she finished speaking, she leaned over and put her lips close to the horse's ear. She didn't know what she was whispering, but the horse under her gradually calmed down after she tossed and turned. Ma Damiai was stunned. He couldn't believe his eyes. He had seen thousands of horses. He also had simple communication with horses. However, he had never seen a horse that recognized its master obediently listen to just a few words. There were myths and legends in ancient times. There were people who understood the language of hundreds of animals. Was he one? He had lived for so long, but he had never believed in myths and legends. The young man pulled on the reins and the horse galloped away. Ma Damiai hurriedly followed. However, he had already missed the best opportunity while he was in a daze. The young man's words were still ringing in his ears. He had a smug expression on his face. "Instructor, your chance to beat me ends here." At the end of the horse path, Shen Han and Xiao Ju sat in a pavilion in the forest. Shen Han didn't touch the tea in his teacup at all. Xiao Ju, on the other hand, drank half a cup. He had a panoramic view of He Yan's fight with Ma Damiai just now. Shen Han closed his eyes. A chill rose in his heart. Xiao Ju was right. It was impossible for such a genius to appear in the Liang Province Guards. She was first in every event and had surpassed all of his instructors. This wasn't a good thing. It was too strange. It was as if it was specially prepared for the Liang Province Guards. The red silk fluttered in the wind. The young man and his horse were like a gust of wind as they swept across the finish line. He reined in the horse and shouted for it to stop. Smoke and dust rose. Behind him was Ma Damiai. She had a serious expression and didn't look relaxed. The two of them stopped one after the other. He Yen got off his horse first. After he got off, Ma Damiai also got off her horse. She walked towards Ma Damiai and stopped in front of her. "I didn't mean to tease you just now. I was forced by the situation. You won't hold it against me, right?" The young man looked anxious. Ma Damiai was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled. "Young man, what are you talking about? It's a competition." A big smile appeared on the young man's face. She wiped the sweat on her forehead and thought for a moment. Then she said, "Then this time, Thanks for letting me win. Thanks for letting me win. In other words, she won again. Chapter 65. Liang Ping and Du Mao, who were behind him, finally rushed back. The two of them got off their horses at the finish line and saw He Yen happily drinking water while Ma Damei stood to the side, deep in thought. It didn't look like Ma Damei had one. The two of them thought at the same time, it can't be, right? Even Ma Damei couldn't beat He Yen? Liang Ping walked to Ma Damei's side. Ma Damei didn't wait for him to speak and said, I lost? She really lost? Liang Ping was surprised. How can that be? How could you lose to him? Ma Damei was the best equestrian archer among their instructors. If Ma Damei couldn't beat He Yen, then didn't that mean that no one in the entire Liangzhou Guard was better than He Yen in equestrian skills? Then why would He Yen come to learn equestrian archery? He could be his own instructor. Did that brat trick you? Du Mao asked in a low voice. Did you fall for his trick? He Yen had just used his whip to deflect all of his arrows. Du Mao was angry just thinking about it. Look, was this really something a new recruit could do? Ma Damei glared at him. I'm not as good as him, okay? She walked to He Yen's side and asked He Yen, little girl, I have something to ask you. Instructor, do you want to ask me what I said to your horse at the end so that it stopped going crazy and listened to me? He Yen tightened his water bag. If you want to ask about this, then forget it. It's an ancestral skill. I can't tell anyone. She winked at Ma Damei, then turned to Liang Ping and said, Liang Jiaodo, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I still have to go to the practice field to train. Liang Ping waved his hand. Forget it, out of sight, out of mind. Du Mao looked at her back and felt that it was strange. She's still quite energetic after this run. She actually still has the strength to go to the practice field to train. What kind of person is she? He's different from you and me, Liang Ping answered grumpily. I've made a fool of myself in front of you. Shen Han was a little embarrassed. All of his instructors had been defeated by He Yen, and this was under the condition that he had used some tricks. If the three of them couldn't defeat him even after joining forces, it would be somewhat inexcusable. It's nothing. You did well. Xiao Ju lowered her eyes and sipped her tea. We didn't ask you to compete in equestrian archery. We just wanted to test the candidates. Now, the candidates have been tested. Does the commander-in-chief still think that there's something wrong with him? Shen Han asked. Yes. Because He Yen is too outstanding? If it was because of this, it could only be regarded as suspicion. There was no evidence. Xiao Ju put down the teacup in her hand. The way he rode the horse at the end is from the barbarian tribe. Barbarian tribe? Shen Han suddenly stood up. The barbarians included the Western Chang, the Southern barbarians, and the current Wutuo kingdom. When the Western Chang rebellion was quelled by General Fei Hong, Xiao Ju personally expelled the Southern barbarian tribe when they invaded. Now, Yudo was ready to make a move. The barbarian tribe and Dawei had always been like fire and water. Even the Western Chang and Southern barbarian tribe had a subtle relationship. Could she be a barbarian? Not necessarily. Xiao Ju shook her head. Did you bring the military registry? Shen Han presented the registry. He Yan's is here. Since this person is different, we can't act rashly and alert him. Pay attention to his every move and be careful. Commander-in-Chief, are you thinking of casting a long line to catch a big fish? We have to catch the person behind it, he replied calmly. After Shen Han left, Xiao Ju flipped through the registry in her hand. Her gaze lingered on He Yan's page for a long time. After a while, she said, Fei knew someone quietly appeared behind her like a shadow and said in a low voice, Young master, send someone to check if there is a son called He Yen in the He family of the capital's gate guard. Fei Nu accepted the order and was about to leave when Xiao Ju called him again. Check again. See if the He family and Su Jingfu have any secret dealings. When He Yen returned to the martial arts practice field, a large group of people who had been waiting anxiously surrounded him. How was it? How was it? What was the result? Why don't I see instructor and the others? Did you win or did instructor win? He Yen smiled and said, It's a secret. This answer obviously did not satisfy everyone's curiosity. However, Hyan's lips were sealed tightly and no one could pry open his mouth. Everyone left resentfully and speculated among themselves. He should have won, right? Hyan doesn't look like he lost. This was someone who believed in her. Since he won, why didn't he say it openly? If he didn't say it, he must have lost and was afraid of losing face. This was someone who did not believe in her. You won't get a result even if you argue. If Hyan doesn't want to say it, you can ask the instructor. This was someone who thought it through calmly. Therefore, when the instructors arrived, everyone swarmed towards the instructors like a swarm of bees. The instructors were confused at first, but when they heard that they were being asked about the results of the competition, they all looked towards Hyan at the same time. They thought that this kid was kind and knew to leave some face for the instructor and did not expose him. The instructor waved their hands and said, "Don't ask any more. Disperse." In the end, they did not say anything. When Hyan went to bed that night, Xiaomai was still thinking about the result. She asked Hyan, "Go, so what was the result?" "The result is not important." Hyan patted Xiaomai's head and said, "The important thing is that I'm going to bed now." She turned over to face the wall and pointed the back of her head at Xiaomai. Xiaomai could not get an answer from her and could only give up. Hyan could not sleep. He kept thinking about what happened on the horse path during the day. No matter what, it was too strange for three instructors to suddenly challenge her to a riding and archery competition. The three of them teamed up to fight her. If she was a normal recruit, she would not be able to handle it. But they did not seem to consider whether she could withstand this kind of competition. It was not like a challenge, but more like a test, or to prove something. In the end, she subdued Ma Damiai's horse. She used a horse taming technique that she learned from a barbarian captive when she was in the army. That captive was a horse trainer. His horse taming technique was superb and made them suffer a lot. After Hyan captured him, the captive was afraid of death. He wrote down his tribe's precious horse taming technique and gave it to Hyan. But that horse taming technique was too complicated. Hyan only learned a little. Even so, it was enough to stop a normal horse. If she did not do that today, she would not have won against Ma Damiai. But if it was really a test, the only person who could command the Liang Province Guards Institute's instructor was either the head instructor or Xiaoju. If it was Xiaoju, what was his purpose? Could it be that he wanted to pick someone to go to the 9 Flags Battalion, so he hurriedly ordered the instructor to test her qualifications and skills? Was that so? Hyan faintly felt that she might have thought wrongly, but she could not find any other way to think about it. After thinking for a while, she decided not to think about it anymore. Since she was already here, she might as well take things as they came. After all, she did not lose this round. Chapter 66. Hyan originally thought that if it was Xiaoju who asked Ma Damiai and the others to compete in equestrian archery with him, then after the competition, they would be able to see that his skills were out of the ordinary and would do something about it. But after more than 10 days had passed, the days were still as usual. Other than the occasional recruits who came to compete with her, nothing else happened. She didn't even get an extra cup of military rations. Maybe it was just a coincidence? Hyan thought that maybe the instructors were bored in the Liang Province Guard and wanted to test their skills. She put this matter to the back of her mind for the time being. After a few rains, the summer heat seemed to have lessened a bit. Occasionally, when she woke up in the morning for a jog, there was no sun and a cool breeze. Before long, the summer of the Liang Province Guard would be over. It was also because the weather was gradually cooling that the recruits were allowed to enter the mountain a few days ago. Mount Baiyue was extremely large. It would take at least a day and a night to climb the mountain. Because of this, the recruits were strictly forbidden from climbing the mountain. At most, they could only go to the top. Every day, 5 people would go up the mountain to patrol. Hong Shan didn't understand. What are 5 people patrolling for? If there really is any danger, will 5 people be enough? Hyan thought, of course it won't be enough. You weren't supposed to be patrolling in the first place. The new recruits of the Liangzhou Guard had been training here for an entire summer. Before long, it would be time for the battle for the flag. The flag battle was to plant more than 10 flags at the top of the mountain. The recruits with better aptitudes and outstanding results would be divided into teams and they would go up the mountain to compete. There would be fights between the teams competing. When they finally went down the mountain, the team with the most flags would be the winner. The final winner would become the most promising recruit and would most likely enter the Vanguard Battalion. He-Yan's goal was no longer the Vanguard Battalion, but 9 Flags Battalion. Now, he had the recruits walk around the mountain every day to familiarize them with the terrain of Mount Bayue. He wanted them to remember the location so that they wouldn't be unfamiliar with the way during the flag battle. However, the recruits didn't know. As someone who had been in the military, He-Yan knew. The last time she fought for the flag in Mo County was connected to the desert. When the wind blew in the desert, the landmarks disappeared and the sand dunes changed. When they were fighting for the flag, the situation was very dangerous. If it wasn't for a big brother in the team who found a small river, perhaps no one would have been able to walk out of the desert. Battle for the flag not only tested a recruit's individual skills, but also the team's teamwork. It wasn't enough to just focus on one aspect. The test for everyone was very high. Although the so-called battle for the flag was in the future, from a certain perspective, the competition had already begun. Smart people would be able to remember the way while patrolling, but those new recruits who did not have any awareness would just take it as a random walk and would not take it to heart. It would not be of any help in the future battle for the flag. Who cares? Ahigo, today it's your turn to go up the mountain. Can you take a bow and arrow and hunt a few rabbits? We'll come back secretly and roast them. I haven't tasted meat for half a month. Xiao Mai licked her lips. I won't take a crossbow. He-Yan smiled. A crossbow is too heavy. I'll take a knife. Most importantly, a crossbow was not suitable for close combat. If there was a problem, it wouldn't be very useful. Moreover, in a team, there would always be someone who carried a crossbow. When the time came, they could just borrow it. Seeing Xiao Mai's regretful expression, she comforted him. It's okay. In a few days, we can go up the mountain together. At that time, we can hunt as many rabbits as we want. Xiao Mai was skeptical. He-Yan couldn't tell him that during the flag battle, everyone would be on the mountain. The instructor wouldn't be there either. They might even have to spend the night on the mountain. Naturally, he could eat whatever he wanted. She tied the belt on her clothes tightly. Then she heard Hong Shan say, "Then go down the mountain early. Let's celebrate the festival together tonight." What festival? He-Yan was confused. Xiao Mai said, "Qixi festival." He-Yan. He almost forgot that today was the 7th day of the 7th month, Daughter's Day. However, why would a group of men celebrate Qixi festival? He-Yan found it funny. Shouldn't we celebrate it with the girls we like? Do you guys like any girls? Hong Shan immediately said, "Don't look down on others. There are many girls who like your brother Shan. If brother Shan wants to celebrate Qixi festival, the girls will definitely be happy." I don't. Xiao Mai quickly said, "But my brother does. My brother likes Sister Xiao Lan, who works at Uncle Sun's noodle shop in the east of the city." Shirtu. He-Yan looked at Shirtu. Shirtu's ears were red. Xiao Mai asked again, "Ahigo, do you have any girls you like? What kind of girls do you like?" He-Yan casually made up a story. Good-looking, smart, good fighting skills, and rich. Oh, right, gentle, considerate, lively, and interesting. It's best if she has some skills in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. It'd be best if she knows how to cook. After He-Yan left, Xiao Mai was still thinking about He-Yan's words. She muttered, "Ahiji's requirements for his sweetheart are really high. Don't listen to his nonsense." Hong Shan nodded. He wants to marry a princess. Xiao Mai, don't learn from him. Xiao Mai nodded seriously. He-Yan went to the weapon rack in the martial arts arena and took a Mandarin duck sword. Ever since she defeated Huang Xiong's golden broadsword with the Mandarin duck sword, there were people practicing with the Mandarin duck sword every day. However, they were not as agile as He-Yan when it came to practicing the Mandarin duck sword. After practicing a few times, they felt that it was not suitable for them and gave up. In the end, He Yen was the only one who used the Mandarin duck sword in the martial arts arena. Today, when she went up the mountain, the Mandarin duck sword was light and easy to use. If she wanted to start a fire and roast 2 fish, the Mandarin duck sword would be easy to kill. She took the Mandarin duck sword and walked to the end of the horse path. The other 4 people were already ready. He Yen did not know these 4 people. They were not Liang Jiaodo's subordinates. When they saw He Yen, one of them smiled and pointed to He Yen. "Go and pick a horse. We're leaving now." He Yen nodded. She went to the stable and picked a horse. The 5 of them went up Mount Baiyue. The mountain was covered with dense forests. It was much cooler and more comfortable to walk than at the foot of the mountain. From time to time, there were wild rabbits jumping by. Someone asked, "Why don't we hunt a few rabbits?" The recruit who greeted He Yen immediately agreed. "Who brought a crossbow?" Everyone looked at each other. Probably because the crossbow was too heavy and they had to stay on the mountain for more than half a day, no one wanted to bring it. So no one brought it. Well, no one brought it. A recruit with slanted eyes shrugged. His tone was not very good, but his eyes were looking at He Yen. "Then we can only watch." Everyone knew that He Yen's archery skills were outstanding. They probably thought that He Yen would bring it. He Yen looked back indifferently with a calm expression. "You asked General Fei Hong to hunt rabbits for you. Did you bring your brain? You're really shameless." She thought. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.